Good evening, everyone. At this time, I would like to call our committee meeting for April 27th, 2022 to order. These are committee issues for May 3rd and May 18th, our legislative meetings for the month of May. Up first, we will have Fire and Police, and that is chaired by Councilwoman Edwina Washington.
So introduce. Okay. Can I have that? Okay. Our first item on the agenda is an ordinance amending the 2022 budget for a justice assistance grant in the amount of $50,532. Who is here to discuss that?
I can.
Thank you.
This is for a grant. It's kind of interesting when the grants come through as to when you're told you have the award, when the award takes effect, and then when we actually have the documentation to do so. So this is one that says it starts in October of last year and it runs for a 36-month period, I believe. So essentially we need it added to this budget because when the budget for 2022 was in process, it's when we were getting notification of award. So it's fairly normal that it's the next year that we ask for an amendment to that budget so that we can add the revenue and the expenses associated with the grant.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from council or comments? No. Any questions or comment from the public? Thank you. Well, I make a motion to move this item to the legislative agenda.
Second.
Which legislative agenda? The May 3rd or
May
the
3rd, 2022. Thank you.
Second. All right, it has been moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
I don't even know who's on that committee. I have,
It's Dr. Dennis and Buckingham.
I think you have a spread on right.
Me.
Oh,
Did you find me with number? Oh, you still want this? All right, which one are we
just
on
for, this has been this is our first committee meeting in a long time. So we have committees, and for police and fire, it is chaired by Councilwoman Washington, and then members of that committee are Councilwoman Dennis and Councilwoman Buckingham.
And I forgot how to do everything. So, all right, so I'm going to call for the committee members' vote on placing this on the May 3rd council agenda. Washington?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Buckingham?
Yes. We need a pen.
Ain't nothing going my way today. I'm supposed to go back home. Oh, she gave me one here too.
It's been so long since we had a committee meeting. I haven't seen.
Pen won't even write. The pen don't even want to be
It's,
here. Okay.
So one of them should have come second.
All right, next we are moving on to Econ and Community Development. And up first, we have Dentsply. So I'm going to turn that over to Councilwoman Washington.
Thank you, Council President Walker. I would like to bring forward for discussion the Dentsply redevelopment overlay. Is there anyone here to speak on that behalf?
Good evening. I'm Blandon Ace. I am Chief Opportunity Development Officer in Economic Development. This is probably incorrectly labeled the Dentsply overlay. This started there, I'll be honest with that, but as the memo that's on your issues chart, if you got a chance to read it, essentially what happens is, and this is throughout the city, but it, again, started with the discussion of potential buyers of the Dentsply site. Most of our redevelopment activities and economic activities are going to happen in areas that are zoned EC, which is employment center. Employment center zoning does not allow housing. So someone would have to come in and request a variance or a special exception or show a hardship. So the discussion began, should the Dentsply parcel be rezoned to like UN2, or should we amend EC to allow it to have housing? And there are trickle-down implications to that. If you would allow housing in all EC zones, then suddenly you'd have housing being able to pop up all over the city where it's not appropriate. So CS Davidson, I asked them to look into options, and their recommendation right now is for the city to develop a text amendment to our zoning laws, or zoning ordinance, that would allow a developer to come in certain circumstances and request to use the redevelopment overlay process, in which case they would then be responsible to create a master plan and discuss and essentially negotiate with Planning Commission and City Council on the specifics of their master plan. That would then sunset after a certain amount of time if they didn't implement it in X number of years. I was a township supervisor out in Springettsbury Township, and we had multiple overlays like this, and it worked out wonderfully, where city council, or in our case, township supervisors, actually got to talk about where the park bench is going to be located and how wide the streets were going to be. And it really gave us, from my perspective, a lot of input. The engineers didn't like it so much, but it did provide a lot of oversight, and working with the Planning Commission and the council, this is something that I always wished that the city had had in place. So I think this could be really advantageous where there are, and it wouldn't apply citywide. There would be things that the engineer or CS Davidson would develop that would say, if the parcel is X, then you could ask to have this applied. Where we're at right now is we need kind of a head nod or a direction from council to direct the Planning Commission to study this and see if it makes sense, or to develop the language for what this overlay how it would read. And my recommendation is that this remain on the issues chart until Planning Commission goes through and approves it and works with the planner, in this case CS Davidson, to develop the zoning amendment. It gives us a lot of flexibility in a lot of situations. Happy to answer any questions if I can. Yep.
Do we have any questions or comment from council?
I have. So I just want to reiterate, because I think what I understand is, as an overlay, if it's approved, if an overlay is approved by council, it's an amendment to our zoning ordinance, which is our rules and regulations. And then we can apply it to Dentsply. Or in the future, it could be applied to other redevelopment sites, but it wouldn't be an automatic application. The
Correct.
master plan for each project would have to come to council.
Correct.
And be approved by council.
Correct.
And so my understanding is also, if you, and I think you made this pretty clear, but I just wanted, that if we changed it from EC, which is actually refers to our industrial sites, I guess.
Yeah, it's
even though
employment center.
Yeah, right. That if we changed it to UN2, then it would change all of the UN, it would change all of the,
You have
it has the ability to change it all across citywide, and we don't want to do that.
Correct,
Okay.
correct, yeah. If you would change what's allowed in EC, correct.
So
Or-
if council, if
Yeah.
council approves it, it would then, first we would approve the overlay. And
Correct.
then we would approve to allow it to be used on certain parcels.
Correct.
Dentsply area.
That's my
or Westland.
understanding. And
That was
that's what we
okay.
need CS Davidson to develop and the Planning Commission to approve
Right.
and buy into.
Right,
It's the
okay.
details and the nuances
Right.
of how it would work.
And it makes sense that way. So it couldn't automatically be applied to anything. It
Yeah, no, not-
always would have to come to council.
Correct,
With a master plan.
correct.
Okay, thanks.
It does add a little bit of burden to council, I'll be honest. We spent a lot of time in the township looking at park benches and road widths, but it would also gave us a lot of control too, which was kind of nice.
Well, it provides clarity, I think.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Blended, has the York City Planning Commission been contacted about this, and do they endorse this?
No, they met right before I received this memo, so I haven't reached out to any of them. The planner right now is through Jessica Fieldhouse, and Nancy, I don't know if Nancy's talked to any of the planning commission or not, but Nancy serves as our planner in absence of our planner. So I'm planning to go to their next meeting. It's a lot of planning, but I'm planning to go to the next planning commission meeting to plan for the overlay.
Thank you.
For the overlay plan. Yeah. It's an opportunity.
Belinda, I just had a question pertaining the Dentsply project. I know it came up in the last meeting. Why would we use ARPA funding to help support this project?
That's actually the next agenda item.
Okay. Okay, I'm ahead of myself.
So you're recommending that this stays in committee until you actually get more detail and follow up?
Correct.
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
But I essentially just need, literally, C.S. Davidson told me, a head nod from council that they wish the planning commission to look at this. So just, I don't think we need a formal resolution directing the planning commission. We just want you to be aware that you're, okay if the planning commission goes ahead and does this. Studies it, not implements it, but develops the language of what it would look like.
Just a head nod. Okay.
There you go. I saw it. All right.
Look forward to the follow-up, and I know you'll be communicating with Chairwoman Washington, and we'll get the information through that as follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you, Blanda.
Our next item is, yes, you could just stay up here. It's for Econ Dev, and this is regarding Dentsply and ARPA funding. Ms. Washington?
Thank you, Council President Walker. I would like to bring for open discussion Dentsply and ARPA funding. Is there anyone here to discuss that with us?
I would be happy to discuss that for you. Again, I'm Blandon Ace, Chief Opportunity Development Officer, and also the Executive Director of the Redevelopment Authority. And I want to, while I have your attention, maybe a little bit of education as it relates to blighted properties and how the RDA and the city handle blighted properties. And this will come full circle if you just indulge me for a few minutes. A blighted property, or as we know, like the red X properties and properties that are in bad shape throughout the city, that's a city process. And that happens with the city's blight task force, the city's planning commission, and the city's vacant property review committee, who all certify a property as blighted. Then the next step is certification by the redevelopment authority, and this is all state law. This is the process for blight. Once the RDA certifies it as blighted, that's when we begin the process of acquisition. The city does not fund any blight acquisition other than the CDBG money that we get through HUD and the amount of $25,000 a year. It used to be $20,000, but thankfully James and I got it up to $25,000. So we get $25,000 a year to acquire blighted properties from the city. Everything else is generated by the RDA on its own merits. All of the acquisition is from buying and selling properties. That's how the blight process works in the city. Right now, we have 26 properties that are going through the blight process. They're either at Planning Commission or Blight Task Force or RDA. Somewhere in that chain of command, there are 26 properties. There are an additional 22 that are on the fire department's do not enter list. These are 22 different ones. Their list is about 40 or 50 properties. There are 13 right now that we are currently exploring to see if they are blighted from neighborhood complaints, tips from our PMIs, other, adjacent property owners that say, hey, can you look at this property? And there are 14 that the RDA has certified as blighted, but we haven't moved forward with because we don't have the funding to acquire. So there are 75 properties right now, this instant, that are blighted in York that are ripe to be acquired. If you assume our last acquisitions of properties that we got were 10,000, 16,000, 28,000, 30,000. Every once in a while, you'll get one that's actually really only worth $1. So if you average it out, it works out to about $19,000 a property. In order for us to acquire 75 properties at $19,000 a piece, that's $1.4 million. On top of that, we pay $500 each time we get one appraised because we have to pay the owner the fair market value. So we have to, in most cases, break in to the property to appraise it. And then, of course, there's legal fees, court filing fees. Sometimes that's as cheap as $2,000. Sometimes it's $8,000. So we'll call that about $5,000. So the legal and appraisal fees is another $400,000 to acquire all these properties. So we're at $1.8 million. We can wipe out all the current blighted properties. What I would like to do, and what I was going to come to council for ARPA funding sometime in the future, is to that funding, plus I think that the city needs an emergency stipend fund. The RDA would be happy to fund that. We just saw it over the last month or so. I'm dealing with one right now. The RDA is currently demolishing a property. We had to have the two neighbors move out. I'm buying them a hotel for a week so that they can live safely away from the demolition. The city doesn't have that funding. I would like to also, I wouldn't like to, but it's possible that 10% of these 75 properties might be demolished. That's potentially another $300,000. We really could use staff to oversee the acquisition of 75 properties. It's hard right now with the 20 that we're going through. And I would like to add a subsidy. We'd like to take these blighted properties and give them to first-time homeowners or owner occupants. Allow someone to buy an inexpensive property, give them a $10,000 grant to fix it up. Maybe we do that with half of them. Call it 40 properties at $10,000. That's another $400,000. All told, my big dream is about $2.8 million. And we'd wipe out all the blight in York for now. That would be transformative. We look like we live in a war zone, and sometimes we do, but the blighted properties aren't helping any. Everybody complains about the red X's and the boarded up windows and all of that kind of stuff. That's how blight works. Dentsply acquisition came out of nowhere. I've been working with Dentsply, not really out of nowhere. I've been working with Dentsply since about mid-2000 when they announced that they were going to sell. I connected immediately with the company. They connected me immediately with the broker, who's Cushman Wakefield out of Baltimore, and actually out of Philadelphia. And just wanted to know what their desires were, what their goals were, how the property was going to be sold. They issued an offering memorandum, and I did send this to all the council, so you are aware of it's a pretty pictures and the data and demographics about York. I have met with probably about 8 or 10 developers who have walked through the property. The broker has kept me constantly involved. One of the advantages from a redevelopment authority aspect is the redevelopment authority can be a grant recipient and applicant. So we have applied for some grants to develop the property. We were rejected because we don't own the property. It's still for sale. I've dealt with DEP and DCED up at the state for an industrial sites reuse program, which is another grant to clean up environmental. We have a preliminary approval for that. It meets their guidelines, but we don't own the property. So my hope is, as a developer would come into town, we would partner with them somehow. Maybe we'd temporarily take title, get the grant, give it back to them, whatever. We learned that.
I'm sorry, did you say DCED? you
Yeah,
applied
Harrisburg,
with DCED, and
correct.
then what happened?
They actually called me and they said, we really like your program, but you don't own it yet. Like, you don't own the property. And that was for funding for, under their Keystone Communities program. Because the property needs to be subdivided, we need to survey the utilities. It was about a $200,000 grant just to learn about the property. Sorry, I'm rambling about the Dentsply, but it's important. Last year, Dentsply accepted letters of interest from developers. And 3 or 4 developers submitted letters of intent or letters of interest to buy Dentsply. I submitted one on the behalf of the RDA and asked them to donate it. And they found my letter intriguing and kind of laughed at the same time. They want money. They want out and they want money. They also put a pause on offers because they were still operating in it. They still had some staff that were left over. Fast forward to this past month, and they opened up offers again and started getting tours. And again, I'm meeting with developers. We're walking through. And just last week, it was Monday or Tuesday of last week, out of nowhere, they suddenly said, all offers are due by May 6th. So anyone who wants to submit an offer, submit it by May 6th. The issue out there is that it's a huge property. It's 17.3 acres. It's 293,000 square feet. It ranges in age from 133 to 6 years old. It's a very, very, very complex site on 30 different parcels. A lot of purchasers right now in the market want one parcel or 2 parcels. There are very few buyers who have the wherewithal to buy the entire thing purely on speculation. If they did, the ones that I've talked to, there was one actually from Rhode Island just the other day, who's trying to cobble together the money to do it, but he doesn't know what he wants to do with it. He just wants to buy it just because it seems like a big area. It might be cool to have. And those are the kinds of people we're dealing with, which is scary a little bit. So our thought is having the city or the RDA or both somehow have site control allows us the ability to determine what is best for our community. And I've always said, and even for the previous grant applications, I've said, ensure appropriate development. We want to make sure this is adjacent to Salem Square. It's got a long history of residential that did exist there at one time. It's adjacent to York College. It's adjacent to what was York International Johnson Controls. It's got a lot of potential. We need to make sure the right thing happens out there. And we need to make sure that our community is helping to make that decision. I envision this to be a great mixed-use development. We could put apartments for rent. We could put senior housing, affordable senior housing. We could put in job training centers. We could put in careers, not just jobs. We can support our entrepreneurial community. We can do park space, trails. There are so many potential ideas out here. And I've been giving all these ideas to all these developers, but they're from out of town. There's not one single local person who has looked at buying the entirety of the site. I think we have the opportunity to transform this into something that is an anchor and a transition piece and an important part of our city. More so, the interesting thing and why I started with blight, it's actually kind of a 2-for-1 deal for council. If we get funding for this, as we sell off those parcels, I can take that money and use it for my $2.8 million in blight, which I think is just a really cool idea, if nonetheless anything else. Because I do have some interested parties who would buy one parcel for $1 million and another parcel for $750,000. So let's put all the money into this and actually, in our world, funding and ARPA and grants is all about leverage. Whatever you can do to leverage what you have into other things is how the grant world best works. And this is an excellent opportunity to leverage funds from the acquisition of a property, roll it over, get that property in productive use, and roll those funds over into blight acquisition. that would be transformative to the rest of the city. It just makes a lot of sense in my world. And I have to follow up because I saw Mr. Kirkland here, and this was really important too. And I brought out the packet. I've been working for years, talking for years with Eric Kirkland about Cadorus Street. Cadorus Street was probably, I think it was, the first use of eminent domain in York. And Cadorus Street relocated all of the properties on Cadorus Street. There's no longer a Cadorus Street. And the names that lived on Cadorus Street were Laws, Ritter, Cravens, Kirkland, Mobley, Owens, Hawkins, Smallwood. This was an entire neighborhood that no longer exists anymore because the RDA came in 1960s and took the houses and made the people leave, in the words of economic development. And economic development in that time was to pave a parking lot for parking for Dentsply. So this is a chance for us to make this right. You know, let's make home ownership happen again. Let's rebuild Cadorus Street. This is just such a cool opportunity. I don't think we're ever going to get a chance. And most developers I talk to, if I say, hey, you know, this was the Kirkland homestead that was destroyed by the RDA in 1960, they don't care. They don't know, and they don't care. Developers are in it for the dollar, you know, and it's a big deal for me personally. I think it's an important thing for our city to consider.
Thank you, Belinda.
Absolutely.
Are there any comments or questions from council? I don't know if she has her question again.
Ma'am?
I have a question. Has city planning been involved in this at this point, or?
Actually, yes.
Okay.
Mike Pritchard, who was the planner, Mike and I sat down, and that was the impetus of the image that's in the PowerPoint that I sent you of how to break it up. If this happens here, they're going to need this many parking spaces. Here's a good place where we could add a street, a right-of-way. Here's how we could develop this. We put a good amount of thought into, just from a planning perspective, what we think a good breakup of the parcels could potentially
But
be.
has the planning commission been involved?
No,
Okay,
no. We never controlled it, so it's not, you know.
right.
In regards to the purchasing options and possible price, has Dentsply, is there any communication from the brokerage company in regards to what they're looking for?
It's been challenging. You know, most times when you sell your house, you put a price on it, and that's what it's want. They've given us a range, and it's been really frustrating. Even all of the developers who I've talked to, that I've walked through tours with, they keep asking, well, what's the price? And Dentsply Sirona, the parent company, refuses to issue a price. They say, here are the comparables that have sold in the area. Here's our property. You tell us what you can pay. So it's been a little weird on pricing of a commercial property. They've only provided a range of what they think it's worth.
And is that just verbally, or have they?
Yes.
No written communication whatsoever? Okay.
One thing that I will add, I hope that someone would ask this, but if the city would provide funding for this, a few things actually. The money isn't due with the offer. There would be a deposit check that would be sent with the offer. I have drafted up a very draft letter of intent to send to them. And I am requesting from them a 90-day due diligence period to have time to deeply review the property and get data. Part of that due diligence that I have requested is, one, staff that will orient us with the property. I don't want them just throwing us the keys and say, figure it out. And two, one of the important things is carrying costs. I'm asking for their operations, maintenance, utilities, everything related to that property, aside from staff, for the last 12 months. It's been mostly vacant for the last 4, but I wanted to get through the winter cycle, and because you can't just own a property and not have expenses. There's going to be electric to keep the elevators running. There's going to be fire alarms. There's going to be phone lines that feed the fire alarms. Things like, lawn mowing, snow. Our hope is we would flip this quickly to somebody else. But there is going to be a time period where there's going to be an expense to carry the property. And that's a concern of the RDA as well. So I think funding provided by the city to purchase this should also be cognizant of carrying costs of the property.
So in the communication with Dentsply, has it just been you communicating, or is the RDA involved with this? I mean, I know that you're the executive director, but has there been any formal communication with Dentsply or the brokerage firm?
No, it's been myself and the broker and all interested parties, and not so much from an RDA hat, but from a city and RDA at the same time. Welcome to York. This is a great place. You want to come here. This is this is good. We'd love to have you. Those kinds of typical economic development, data, demographics, all of those kinds of things. But they have not approached the RDA. Doesn't really have anybody that's in charge of this. It's simply their broker out of Baltimore.
Okay. So the gentleman last week, I was a bit thrown by his discussion or the information. So what role does he play? Did he reach out to the city? Did he reach out to you?
He was one of the developers that we met in the walkthrough. He is developing subsidized senior housing, which is a critical need in the county, much less our community. We haven't built any new senior housing components in the city for probably not since, I don't know, Broad Street Towers. I mean, there's more, obviously, but it's a demand, it's a need. And his goal is to secure funding. He was asking for Home Dollars, which is a program that the city runs through HUD. So he was approaching the city for Home Dollars. He wants to apply for low-income housing tax credits, which applications are due, I think, in June or July of this year, for funding for next year. So in his world, everything has a very linear approach to reach an end goal in the future. One of his things is, for his funding applications, is site control. And so he is constant, and I like his product, I like his company. They've done a lot of things locally. I have introduced him to other developers who are interested and say, if you're interested in doing this, but you don't know what to do with this building, I know a guy that does. So I'm trying to marry all of these developers together to each other. I just haven't been able to find the umbrella that pulls them all in. I think we can be that umbrella.
I have a question. So last week, we during our legislative meeting, we were hit with the WODA guy, right? And then we were also told that they had put the property for sale,
I'm sorry.
and that remember that they had mentioned that the property was going on sale or something, or that Dentsply, and that threw a wrench in their plans.
It was the immediate request for offers. Everyone has been, well, sometime in the next couple of weeks, next month, let's talk about getting your offers in. The broker's been really relaxed about, we'll get to this in June sometime, take your time, figure it out. And then suddenly out of nowhere, they said, you have 2 weeks.
So the mayor had mentioned that we had, 24 to 72 hours to discuss these immediate requests for offers. So where do we stand less than a week later?
This is it, yeah. I mean, the 24 to 48 hours was mostly internal to me. Figure this stuff out, get this done.
Okay.
Develop some information I can send out, draft a letter of intent, tell us what we think we should offer, those kinds of things.
Did they get any offers?
I did talk to the broker the other day. He anticipates receiving 4 or 5 offers, is what he verbally told me. He doesn't know how big they'll be, what they'll be, but apparently he's got 4 or 5 on the hook.
And that's for the entire property?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's an important point. We could submit an offer. Doesn't mean we're going to get it. This is what we're willing to pay. There could be somebody who comes to town with $7 million and says, I'm buying it tomorrow for $7 million, and we're out. And that could happen.
Which leads me to my next question. how much in ARPA funds or are you looking to have ARPA funds pay for this, or?
Yeah, and a lot of it, I'll be honest, is unknown because I don't know the carrying costs. And I'd like to bake money in, quite honestly, I'd like to bake money in there for staff to start working on blight as well. So in my mind, I'm thinking we have staff money, we have carrying costs, which I don't know a firm number on, potentially $100,000 worth of engineering. I had budgeted $20,000 for a broker to represent us. I spoke to a broker today and he said, I'll just do it because I want to be your eyes and I want to help the city, which was fabulous. And then the acquisition price on top of all of that. So in my mind, just again, without knowing the acquisition and what it would be, and without having the broker's advice on exactly what our offer should be, I cannot see any point where there's no way we would go over 5 million. So my discussion yesterday with the mayor and briefly with Sandy is, very briefly with Sandy, she was on the phone, is that a bill, she was there, she was in the room.
Yes, no
we didn't
discussion.
talk. Yes, we didn't talk about it.
For the media.
Yeah, yes. An idea was that a bill would be passed that would be up to a certain amount of money. And up to, or not to exceed, call it 5 million, whatever. I don't know that number right yet. Hopefully, I'm having actually lunch with the broker on Monday. We'll be able to narrow down a lot of these costs. But before we can develop a bill, I need to know that number a little bit better. And at the same time, the local broker who's volunteered to assist can help me with the calculation of the future value of the individual parcels. So as I said last week briefly, the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. So you could potentially buy this for X number of dollars, but it's really worth X plus 1. And we need to figure out what that X plus 1 could potentially be before we move forward too far.
So, of course, I want to support, and I'm going to support anything that benefits the city, but I just find it hard to believe that these conversations have only taken place over the course of the last week.
Which conversations?
All these conversations that are taking place.
No, I've been having these conversations for a year and a half.
And
I just didn't come to you for.
But not this specific
No, but
conversation
not
because
this
there was
specific-
no
yeah,
call.
no,
There
no.
was no call.
Right,
for-
there was
for-
no immediate call for offers from the.
That just happened on Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
Just happened. So you got to react when things happen.
okay.
Just, what is a carrying thing? I'm not sure I'm hearing it right. Carrying cost?
I'm sorry, a carrying cost is a cost to carry a property. If you go on vacation for a year and move to Florida but still own your house, you're still gonna have to pay maybe your gas bill, your water bill, your electric. So a property, any property has what we call carrying costs.
Right. So while it's sitting empty.
Correct.
I got you. Thanks.
Lawn mowing, snow removal,
Yep.
yeah.
Just for a clear understanding, what is being requested from council?
I think the request is to allocate ARPA funding in the amount not to exceed or up to $5 million for the acquisition and redevelopment of blight.
And with the gentleman from WODA that came last week, is that included in this number or the properties he mentioned, Jan?
That would be a
Yes, they-
recapture, and that's where when I sell that parcel, we subdivide the part that he wants, make sure the utilities are separated, sell him what he wants, use that money to fix our blighted Red X properties.
But that is not a given and it is not part of this agreement.
It is not, right? Correct.
There are other parties that are also interested.
Yeah, it's not specifically for him. That's a very good point, Mayor. That we would put this out on our own and say, we are selling now. Let's ask for prices.
Who requested the gentleman from WODA, who requested for him to come before council?
That was a
It's a
suggestion of-
concern for me because,
Yeah, that was a suggestion of James Crosby for him to come and talk to you about home funding. Just to educate council on his company and talk about his request for home dollars.
okay, and did he
I was not
communicate-
involved in that at all.
So there was no communication with anyone else that he was going to derail to the ARPA?
Yeah, no, he told me when he walked in the door. He literally told me when he walked in the door, hey, I'm going to change my presentation and ask the city to buy it. Which was, I'll be honest, that was always in the back of my head. Hey, if I could, if I had deep pockets, what would I do? And buying Dentsply was one of those things. But I just never came to you and asked for it because I was waiting for the private markets to do their thing. But it always was. It's kind of be careful what you wish for because it might come true, and that's exactly what happened. This is a phenomenal opportunity, and it really is taking and combining, as I said earlier, almost like a 2-for-1. Let's acquire this so we can make sure the right thing happens and we control who buys it, and the community has input and the right thing happens, and maybe we rebuild entire neighborhoods that we once destroyed. And then let's take that money and let's get rid of blight. I mean, it's almost magical the way it all comes together like that.
I have a question. Council had requested $750,000 in ARPA funding for the renovations for Penn Market, and we received some pushback from the mayor. I'm wondering why this project is different.
That's not a question for me.
No, I can respond, certainly. Council never received any pushback from me on the project. It was the way the funding was being utilized. I was in an effort to make this a community-funded project by going to the different philanthropic organizations to try and build up the amount that we needed. And council wanted to just use all ARPA money. And I did not think that was a good plan. I thought that if you would give me the $325,000 that I asked for, I would then have leverage to try and get money from the other entities within the community and turn that $325,000 into the $750,000 that we needed. Council chose to represent the other position, so that's where our disagreement was. Our disagreement has never been in support of the project. It was in how do we get to the money that we need.
Then why is this project good to use all ARPA funding?
Because the intent is that we get all of our money and more back.
Yeah, we've been asked, will you ever sell Penn Market? And our answer's always been not necessarily. In this case, will you sell Dentsply? Heck yes, and as quickly as possible.
That is the point.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to add earlier, we also have a school district that is looking for a location for a West End school. While they have not done their due diligence, they are interested in knowing more about the property and seeing if they can do anything there. There has been discussion of a new community center on that property. And of course, the extension of the trails along the Cadorus going to Bance Park. There has been discussions of many different uses for this property, and I would add that the Northwest Triangle is a property, and some may be about to point to it and say, well, there's your example of why you don't do this kind of thing, but I will continue to disagree with that. It's exactly what we need to do, but they spent $20 million almost. I know I can account for $14 million specifically, but if you talk about things like carrying costs and talk about things like the taxes that we did not receive, $20 million over 20 years was put into that 4 to 5 acre parcel. We have 17 acres, already have great buildings. It's got great bones. It's got all the infrastructure it needs that Northwest Triangle doesn't have. It's really... it's almost a flip situation if that's what we want, if we were to control it and then direct the different buildings to different types of development. This is I feel that this is, and I don't, if I had another pot of money sitting directly in my lap right now today, I would say maybe let's use, like I did with the Penn Market. If you recall, I took 3.25 out of the expected revenues of the wastewater treatment plant, and then asked you for 3.25 out of ARPA. I'm not saying I love taking it out of ARPA, but I am saying that this is an immediate need, and with the plan put in place by Blanda of using that money to reinvest in the blighted properties in our neighborhoods, we do get the best outcome in the end, and if done right, we will be multiplying that ARPA money into more funds so that we can address more blighted properties and create the fund that we had discussed regarding being able to house individuals that are displaced, as was the case with the recent demolition on East South Street.
As I said, it's in our world, Melanie's world, grant funding is all about leverage. What can you do to double it, duplicate it, mirror it, get funding from here to match that, which matches this, and this is a similar opportunity where I think we can control our destiny of our neighborhood, control the destiny of that development, and sell it off and use that money to do other great things.
That sounds, it sounds great and dandy. It sounds more of a wish list to me. I'm more interested in what's going to go on the property short term rather than knocking down all these buildings, which is great. But oftentimes we see that you can't do it because you're spending money over here, COVID hits, and you've got to do this or that. So that sounds more of a wish list. So I'm not really going to buy that. But I'm more interested in what's going to happen short term and immediately. And is it the city that's going to purchase this, or is it the RDA? And what are the benefits?
That's a further discussion. Immediately, my gut tells me that the city purchases it with the city's money, and potentially the RDA carries it, that we would transfer it over to the RDA. Twofold on that, full transparency. The city, and the way that I think that I will draft the letter to Dentsply is that they can donate to a municipality. A corporation can donate to a municipality. We get donations occasionally through the city. They can deduct that as a write-off as a donation. So they could value this property at $20 million, whatever they think they could get an appraisal or a book value of their donation, of their value. Subtract our purchase price, and the balance can be a donation. And I wrote in the letter of intent that we would support, happy to write you a letter saying thank you for your donation. So that's one aspect of that. I think it's advantageous that no other buyer, I think, will have the ability to offer them. And the second aspect with regards to city versus RDA is when you get into disposition of property. A municipality must put out a property for bid to the highest bidder, not necessarily the best user. So you must be cautious when the seller the city, if the city wants to sell off a property for an incubator, for a small business startup, low impact industrial career to a great idea, you're going to have to put that out to bid and see who actually wants to buy that for the highest price. So there are some advantageous means for both. That's why we have a redevelopment authority.
Thank you, Blanda. Are there any further comments or questions from council?
Chairman Black is here also.
I have a couple more questions. So just to follow up with my most recent one in regards to what exactly was requested from council. So we're looking to use federal dollars. We definitely need to make sure that we identify potential conflicts of interest and eligibility requirements.
Sure,
so
absolutely.
I do see Ms. Baldwin in the back. I do remember that you did mention that this was discussed with her. So how are we with this? The city with ARPA funding, if this were to move forward, how are we eligible? How does it fall into ARPA?
Going to tell them about our argument today?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, not an argument.
Hi, I am Melanie Baldwin. I am blessed to be the City of York's grant administrator. And so the questions you're going to ask me, I'm a visual person, so I'm going to pass something out to you real quick. It's nothing nefarious, scandalous, or awful. They're done. Oh, no, they're done. We are going to run. We're going to make And so, the answer is yes. So that's the basic answer. We are eligible to do that. Then the acquisition is a free and clear expenditure categories. So if you remember anything that I've told you about ARPA, we have expenditure categories. My expenditure categories were redone on last Friday, and they are now 83 versus the 67. 83. And so the ones that would fit what Dentsply does, because I know that's what you want to know. The ones that would fit are on page 36, there is a strong, healthy communities, and it's halfway down, and it's demolition and rehabilitation of properties. So we're able to do that as a part of a healthy community, building a healthy community. What I've been talking about with Blanda is, a transformational district for Salem Square. Since we have the CCI initiatives, community initiatives, and Salem Square is one of the initiatives that Department of Community and Economic Development wants to go throw all into. So that would make sense. For some of the things, and I guess if we purchase it as one parcel, I do not believe that I have to be as intentional with my treasury report, but I'm going to find out. My second treasury report is due this Saturday, and none of this will go on it because it's March 31st was the first quarter. After this, then we will have all these wonderful things on our reports. So I need to make sure that if it's one parcel, do we have to, if we sell it to someone else, that's fine. We get the program income from anything that we sell. If we sell it to a nonprofit or another business entity, I need to make sure that they don't have to use it in the same vein that we purchased it in. So, i.e. means that because we are doing a housing project, we have to use it for housing. Blight is perfect because it's blight. So I don't really think that's a big deal, but I need to make sure because as I've told you, I don't look good in orange. Assistance to small businesses. So definitely what we think about, because when Blanda and I have conversations, we talk about actual things, like actual businesses and innovations and things of that nature. So, so business incubators are okay, and then rehabilitation of commercial properties or other improvements. So we're really solid on that piece. We don't have to worry about us not being able to have an impact. So we're eligible.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any further questions or comments from council?
Just a bit more with when you say city or RDA. So I'm not sure what Mr. Black had to say, but maybe he might answer some of my questions before I.
This is committee, it's more relaxed. I heard you say that.
Michael Black, RDA, Board Chairman. All I wanted to do was just state the board support. We passed a resolution last week to pursue this project, pending a positive outcome of the due diligence. If we're wildly successful with this and some of the other things the RDA is working on, in addition to the blight remediation and the other things Blaine had talked about, the RDA would love to be able to fund ourselves, as far as staff, other city resources that we use. And ultimately, we'd love to be able to make a payment in lieu of taxes on all RDA properties, which as of today is 228 parcels. So I thank you for considering.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Northwest Triangle came up, and I think one of my concerns would be just the time that it has taken with the RDA and the Northwest Triangle. And so with your letter of support, would you plan on submitting any type of proposal, development plans when it comes to the parcels? Or is this, what are you exactly looking for? So the RDA has a letter of support. And then earlier when you first started talking, Mr. Nace, it was city or RDA. My concern is more of proceeds and who has the authority to do what with those proceeds if the RDA sells parcels. That's my concern.
Right, and my intent is to find a way to fund my $2.8 million dream of fixing all the blight and getting rid of all the red X's throughout the city. And I can do with half of that. Whatever is remaining after that, and I think, and the chairman and I briefly spoke about it, I think we come to a mutually agreeable way that this money can be reused. To the mayor's point, there's a potential the city, the owner and seller could potentially make $1 million off of this deal. And that not only involves the recapture of the original investment, but that's above and beyond. Again, depending on carrying costs, depending on engineering, depending on what you could actually sell it for. But this money could be used to subsidize an incubator or to, do good things or provide more grants or stipends for home improvements or, provide more first-time home buyer down payment assistance or, let's figure that out. We could, and at that point, and Melanie's going to slap me, but at a certain point in time, if you get program income after the end of the program, after 26, it becomes completely unrestricted.
Okay, I see her. I see heads going this way. I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm reading body language back there.
I think
so
the short answer is, if there's a profit above and beyond, we recapture the money, it still becomes available. And I want to make sure that we can improve the city. That's the goal.
To that point, I would just say, dealing with the RDA, you're dealing with a body that is going to act in the best interest of the community as far as any proceeds here are concerned. And if there's a private developer that comes in and does this whole site, who knows if that would be the case.
Can I say something? So, in discussions with some of your colleagues, with one specifically, and I'm not going to mention, maybe a year ago when the conversation of Penn Market came up, his comment to me was that he wanted to sell Penn Market, and he was speaking for himself, not the RDA at the time, that he wanted to sell Penn Market to the highest bidder. And so...
Is your mic on?
No, I apologize. And so that kind of struck me kind of odd and rubbed me the wrong way. So I want to make sure that, and on record, that that's not going to be the RDA's position on this property if the RDA does own it.
Are you directing that to me?
It's just a comment, because we made it very clear last week that we want to ensure that whatever goes in there is going to benefit the community, and it doesn't go out to the highest bidder.
That is, go ahead.
And this is where we have to continue to negotiate how this is going to work, between the city and the RDA. I'm with you 100%. I believe that we all, or at least some of us, have an agreement that affordable housing is an issue that should be potentially addressed with some of these it's 30 parcels. So when I say some of the properties, I mean parts of the 17 acres. And that's where we figure out, where we have to work through. Does the city hold the property and then give parcels to the RDA as we wish, and say, hey, here is a parcel that you now can proceed with your redevelopment and your negotiations, and potentially one of the things is the RDA is eligible for different types of grants that the city is not eligible for. Also, the RDA is, as was mentioned, is able to direct a property to an individual for the best and highest use, while the city may be required to give it to the highest bidder. So there are benefits for us to control part of the decision making, but there are benefits of having it in the RDA's hand at the appropriate time. And while these discussions have not yet been completed about how that will work, that is my approach, and I would request that council join me in that approach, and we work on agreements where we make sure that the city's interests are represented for every parcel, and that the RDA works with us as a partner, and we get the advantage of all the benefits of the authority's position of holding land as well.
And I think it's important to note that, just as a continuation to your comment, the RDA took quite a bit of heat last year from a developer who wanted to buy one of our properties that we had on the market for sale. His price was $10,000 more than the person who got to buy the property from us, because he was going to rent it out and this person was going to own it and live in it. And the RDA has a hierarchy of choices. It's always owner occupant, then owner flipper, then landlord, in that priority. And that person, the RDA left $10,000 on the table. And he called the entire world and everybody he knew, complaining how foolish the RDA was, that we are walking away from $10,000. But the RDA stood its ground and said, no, our priority is people that own houses, and that's who we sold it to, even at a loss. And I'm almost positive I know who you spoke to on the board, and that is always his position on, and it may rub you the wrong way, but just like this board, I know you all are individuals, but the voice of the board is what matters.
And I can say that that discussion has not taken place at a board level as far as selling the highest bidder.
Yeah.
I do think that this is another once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that probably has been said over and over and over again. Just my priority, and I know it was mentioned last week by Councilwoman Washington and Councilwoman Dennis in regards to affordable housing, addressing homelessness here in the city of York. I agree with all of that. I still stand with the city having control of what is done with those proceeds, with a portion being designated to the RDA, if that can be done, and if it's eligible, because I believe that is related to ARPA. That's just me speaking. We have to get the ARPA Bible and the experts back there. I thank you for the work that's been done so far. I'm just looking to see if do you guys have any other questions? I'm going to look to see if I.
One very brief question, and it might be for Kim. Can the RDA, is there a vehicle for the RDA to transfer money back to the city?
Yeah, we write you a check.
Right. I mean, I didn't know if there were any stipulations about, funds having to be separate or whatever.
And ironically, there's actually been, maybe not last year, but the past couple of years, there's been a $60,000 line item in the budget because we were going to administer a RACP grant, and we charge a 1% fee for my services or staff services to administer the RACP grant and be the pass-through. And that 1% of $66 million, we were going to immediately turn over to the city as income. Yeah.
And
Thank you.
To follow up on that, and to follow up on Madam President's comment, the administration currently provides approximately $150,000 worth of time, worth of our employees' time. Well, that's for their whole salary, but there is a potential, as with the $60,000, there is the potential for them to pay us for the staff time. So we could include that in agreement, saying, for the next 10 years, you will provide us with the $150,000 in staff time. There are a lot of ways to make an agreement so that the funds come back to the city of York, or at least part of the funds come back to the city of York, however we want to do it.
Thank you. So with that being said, and I know there has to be a lot of discussion and plans submitted, et cetera, when are you looking to bring this to council for a bill or a resolution?
That's a very good question. Quite frankly, the letter of intent, the offer is due Friday, May 6th. You don't have to give them $1 million check when you submit your deposit, or when you submit your letter. The way I have things drafted right now is about a 90-day due diligence, which is 3 months before settlement could happen, before we would draft a sales agreement. Again, I'm having a meeting with our volunteer broker rep on Monday, and I'm going to get his feedback and his opinion. But quite frankly, the cash wouldn't be needed for, potentially not until October. I mean, to be negotiated with the seller. But I would like to be able to tell them that we have the ball rolling on the funding, or that there's at least the potential to get the funding. Quite honestly, we could submit the letter of intent, and I don't know what their response time is going to be. I did speak to their broker the other day, and he was unsure. He thought maybe it would take them a month before they got back to anybody about who they want to sell it to, if they received multiple offers. So we may not hear, let's call it end of May, when we hear back from them, and then we go through 3 months of due diligence. We could not do anything until August and September and still be okay. Conversely, they could come back right away and say, this is great, let's roll. We just, honestly, I'm sorry, I just don't know.
I do. Yeah. We need a resolution for a letter of intent on the May 3rd agenda. Letter of intent.
That's a very good point. This is different from the funding.
That's what we need.
You're absolutely right. We do need the resolution for the letter of intent to submit to purchase. Well, I was doing what's on the agenda is the funding, not the actual motion.
Right.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Amanda, do you have access to the property?
With appointments, yeah. I mean, you have to schedule.
Can you, and I don't know if council would like to, I'd like to see the property if maybe we can get some council members out there I've never had the pleasure of walking it. I know it's probably very big, but.
Yeah, I'd be happy to set that up. If we can coordinate through email with some times when you all are available. I can reach out to the broker and get a tour set up.
So, letter of intent.
A resolution supporting a letter of intent from the city of York to the brokers of Dentsply Sirona.
Has that been drafted?
Yes.
Yes, no.
Yeah. It has been drafted. It was part of the information that I emailed.
The letter of
to you.
intent has been given to you.
Is it in the packet or is it in the email that?
It's in the email.
The email that you sent yesterday.
It's the one with the big red confidential word.
I didn't get a chance to, that came later on. I was busy. Okay.
Yeah.
So the letter is included, a letter of intent. Okay. And then just with that piece, so has this primarily been you working on this? Is the rest of the Department of is the director of economic?
She's absolutely in the loop and aware of everything. I mean,
Okay.
when you say working on it, yeah, it's me interacting with the broker and taking the phone calls from the developers and feet on the street, walking through the hallways of the building, those kinds of things. But it's me and the planner who came up with a vision. It's me and the director who's been in the loop. It's me and Melanie who've talked about funding. So yeah, it's all hands on deck. What few hands we have.
All right. I haven't had a chance to see the letter of intent, so I'm sorry. But
I don't think, I'm assuming it's not the final one.
No, it's a draft.
Right.
but that's not even on here, so.
Yeah, the numbers in the draft letter of intent are not reflective. They are just placeholders, essentially.
Okay. Well, that's not on here.
Thank you. Is there any other comment from council? Is there any comment from the community, from the public?
George Fitch, 106 South Beaver Street. While hearing all of this is great, and I know that we're definitely looking for housing, but also, could you also plan to have a grocery store? Because while Seatown is nice, and we have some bodegas around, a grocery store would be a nice option, because there's a lot of people that live in the city that cannot always drive out to get to a major grocery store. So just the thought, like you said, once in a lifetime opportunity to bring a grocery store back to the city.
Thank you. Any other further comment from the public?
Jeff Kirkland, 465 West Market Street, York, PA. Could I ask Blandon a question just briefly before I start? And that was, say the city does not get buy the property or some other developer buys it. What type of controls do we have as far as dictating what is done with that property?
Just so everyone can hear my answer. Yeah, if a private developer comes in, they'll be, of course, beholden to the zoning. And I think every developer that has looked at this so far has had a housing component to it. Mm-hmm. So I still think, in our previous discussion, the redevelopment overlay is a good idea. But they would still, the controls that we would have is strictly limited to geometry. But that's it. Yeah.
Okay, good evening, committee members. Blandon said quite a few words there when he was talking, and some of them were very important. That planning is definitely important with the development of this land. He said this has the potential to be transformative in our community. And this large piece of tract of land like this will be transformative, dictate what happens in this community over the next few years, if not decades. He talked about doing what's best for our community. And many citizens feel that much of the development that has been going on has not been best for our community, been in the best interest of the people in our community. And he also said about community helping to make some of these decisions and all. And I think, and I know you guys try to get people involved in the deliberations and all, and it's just a lot of pushback, a lot of apathy, but we need to have people have a say in what is going on here in this community. Land. The core of all planning is land. The use of land goes deep. It becomes a basis of all social, economic, and political problems at times. I was reading a study, and it said about even years ago, 2/3 of all juvenile delinquency cases in the courts came from areas that had been neglected or cut off from development and all. And when you see the development patterns that are happening here in the city, you see that even in areas that were the genesis at the heart of the troubled times we've experienced in the 60s and all, that those areas have been neglected and all. And that's where a lot of our present day juvenile delinquency and antisocial behaviors come from. It irks me that Dentsply continues to hold sway over a lot of things here, that they dictate what's going on here, because I personally and it's not just fact or anything, but just personally feel that they have not been a good neighbor here in the community, and they have left. Blanda said something about rolling out the welcome mat to people that want to come in and develop the community. But we don't want to keep rolling the welcome mat out and people just come in and stomp all over us, take what they could take and leave the community. When I look at what's happened over there and some of the plots of land that they bought, and if you go over and you tour that area, they bought plots of land and they have them tore down houses, but it's just lush green land there. But right in the middle of that land, it's always stuck a big sign saying, stay off. No ball playing or anything. The kids in the neighborhood don't have access to that land and all. Brief but quick history, I know I don't have a lot of time, of that Dentsply tract. It's very dear to my heart and many families that came here to York from the south, Bamberg. They end up living over there on Cador Street, one of the first developments that was like a village. Grandfather came here in 1921. And a lot of those men, they bought and they owned those homes up into the 50s. When, like Blanda said, the first case of eminent domain ever in the state of Pennsylvania was enacted at that time, where they came in and took that land, those houses from those homeowners, my grandfather and those people, and gave them a pittance for those houses, to the point where they had to go back out on the housing market and go into debt to get more homes for us to live in. And they go into debt for that. And it was supposed to make a large park over there, Martin Luther King Park, but it ended up happening was half of the, probably more than half of the land was given to Dentsply. Not given, I guess, I'm sure they paid for something. $14,000. $14,000. They paid for half of that land, and they put the little rinky-dink, maybe I shouldn't disparage it like that, but the rinky-dink park over there to honor Martin Luther King and all. So it's you know, I feel real emotional about this whole issue of what's going on over there in the West End. We have an opportunity, you know, to address some of these issues with this development of this land. I'm hoping that we do the planning, that we involve the community a little more, take some extra effort, you know, to do that, and let's try to make sure that this benefits. I had a brief word with Blanda earlier, and he dropped a little information on me about some potential developments, and it seems really great, you know, if we could pull something like that off and make sure that the people of York benefit from that. That might be all of my, I'm sure I had a lot more, but I don't want to ramble on and all like that, but this is important. You guys are going to set the tone for the next few decades and all. I read a report, I just sent information to other people called the Baker Report that they did back in the 1940s. And it outlined development, a master plan, they called it, for development in this community. And they pledged that that plan was not going to gather dust. But it ended up sitting on the shelves for the most part and gathered dust to the point where we're still studying and looking at ways to address the issues and all, when many of them were solved through this plan. So I'm hoping that we don't look back 20 years from now and say that you guys had an opportunity to make a positive impact on this community and rectify some of the past problems and issues that we've had, and that nothing happened and all like that. So I urge you to continue, you know, your diligence, continue looking at this project. If they're asking for our money, ARPA money in particular, that really galled me. They're asking for ARPA money that's supposed to benefit the members of this community. We ought to make sure that it definitely benefits the members of this community. And if we do put money in there, we ought to make sure that we have a real good degree of control of what happens to that land over there. Thank you for hearing.
Thank you.
I have a question for Mr. Kirkland. Can you step up? Because I love your historical perspective on York, and I think I've learned more from you than anybody else in the city about a lot of York's history. But I do want you to share a story you shared with me, and I continue to share that story about when you were a young child and the quarters.
A young child and what?
The quarters that they would throw off.
The workers.
Yes.
The workers. We were, you know, it's poor. A quarter was a lot of money back then in the 1950s and all. And what they would do they'd be up on the second, third floor of that building there. It was on the Grantley Street side, and they would heat these quarters up till they were red hot, and they throw them down there, you know, and watch us scramble, you know, to try to get the money, you know, and laughing at the little so-and-sos. Look at them scramble for that money, for that hot money. They don't know it. And before we knew what was going on, you try to grab that quarter and, you know, you're burning your hands and all, like, you know, so it was, you know, we had many things going on in York back in the days, but I reiterated that to Councilmember Lou. Yeah. I wasn't one that got burned, but several of our friends, you know, we did and all like that. But just overall, when we welcome people to the community, we want to make sure that they're coming in with our best interests. You look at our developments over the years, and we always get these pledges about it's going to help the community, but oftentimes it's helping a certain segment of the community. You know where, I don't have to say where the development goes on, but our neighborhoods continue to be neglected. And in that Baker report back in those days, in the 40s, it said we have to rectify some of these issues by using our resources efficiently, or else we're going to continue to have these problems and all. So let's begin that process of rectifying these with this major move right here, this what Blandon called a transformative process.
Thank you. Is there any other further comment?
Hi, I am a resident of the city, but I am also the ARPA person, and I'm always amazed when we have ARPA discussions and we do not ask the ARPA person anything. The easiest way for ARPA to fund this and keep site control is for the city to purchase it and keep it until 2026. So therefore, you'll be able to tell people what they can do there because it will have certain expenditure categories it has to be in. But since no one asked me, I will just give that to you for free. But that's easy. I mean, that's the thing is that we can make them a subrecipient, the RDS subrecipient, and they can do that. And then that way they will have to be, they are required to do the same thing that ARPA does. That is the way that happens. So any person or organization that's doing anything ARPA related has to do our subrecipients. And it's been reviewed by our lawyer, and that is the easiest way to do that. That is a suggestion.
Thank you.
So, were you included or not
Included
in this discussion?
No,
Because
I'm included in, I guess my angst is, I'm included in discussions with Blanda, but then other discussions that happen, they come to me afterwards. And so it's sort of like, I want to say yes to everything, but it does take a bit of research, and it does take a little bit more than, do you know? And so this part is easy. So I never discussed with Blanda just having the RDA become a subrecipient, that they sign the document, they have to follow whatever we say.
I assumed that.
Mm-hmm.
And where does 2026 come in, Melanie?
Oh, I'm sorry. 2026 is when all ARPA's done. So after that period of time, whatever you do with whatever you've gotten is no more restricted.
Okay.
It's not restricted anymore after that time. And it's going to take, I'm sure, more than 5 years to do all the things that you would like to do over at Dentsply, and it just seems like the better option so the site control can be under the city.
Thank
thank
you.
you, that's helpful.
However, so that is one aspect of it. However, there are, for instance, different types of development that we could allow to happen immediately that would fall under the guidelines. So it's not necessarily the best thing, and these are internal conversations. It's not necessarily the best thing to hold the entire space for 5 years. We have opportunities as long as, well, that's how it, I'm sorry, that's how it came across.
No, I'm not saying hold it and not do anything with it. I'm saying hold it and develop it.
Oh,
But
okay.
you'll have site control over it. So that's what I was talking about, not us just hold it and look at it. 'Cause, but no, I'm sorry,
That's how
I
it's happened.
apologize.
Yep.
So us being able to do our development, do our housing, affordable housing, mixed-use housing, being able to do those things, and that any person who comes in has to do what we say. So it's not holding it for 5 years. I apologize. It's more of just developing while we are holding it.
Got it.
And that's why I gave you the expenditure categories, so you could look at it and be able to see what we're talking about. I got it.
Thank you. just given the history that I'm finding out more and more in regards to the land over there, I definitely look forward to a detailed plan from beginning to end. I know there's a lot of discussion going on. And also making sure, even if in the future, if developers are entertained, that we do continue to move forward with Article 136, procurement, and also making sure our minority community plays a part with this. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I think we can really have true economic and community development with this before us.
Is there any further public comment? Okay, yeah. Oh, yes.
Manuel Gomez, York City. It's a brilliant presentation. There was a lot to take in. It all sounds very preliminary to me. If I would, please, ask to be indulged, I would like for both the mayor and Blanda himself to give me one gauge. If you gauge the risk at the length of full scope, from 1 to 5, 1 being least risky, 5 being absolutely risky, what number would you say, Mayor, if you would, please? 1 or 5?
I'll give you a 1.5.
Mr. Nays,
Barely above risky. Or barely above.
I was going to say 1.98.
So they're below the threshold of 2. Myself, you probably can sense where this is going to go. I see it as incredibly speculative, very risky. The term that comes to mind is catching a falling knife. You may end up catching it on the right end. Of course, we the people, which are typically holding the bag and carrying the risk, I think that we'll end up on the opposite end. I know the Northwest Triangle is these days talked about cavalierly, which is a bit of a shock to me. The prison, I can go on and on. I don't want to belabor the process, but what would we have that would be comparable, that we can point to in terms of the RDA and say, this is what we've done in the past, this is a success? One of the key factors in this was disposition, which wasn't talked about much, but I'm glad it was at least mentioned. Disposition strategies have long been a hot topic here. Again, I don't want to belabor this and draw it out further, but the enforcement mechanisms are also something I would like to hear in further detail, because that sort of momentum in terms of what the RDA does in terms of land usage and the ramifications and impacts it can have in terms of development and actual community control overall, and the history of RDA with regards to community control and the development of properties, or lack thereof when it comes to community control, is another hot topic. There's a lot of things that are interwoven. One question that I have in terms of the disposition strategy is further emboldened when it comes to my stream of thought, because the committee chairwoman actually made an astute point. There seems to be some sort of adversarial, or I don't know if it's an opportunistic element with regards to the city's control versus the RDA's control, not just with these prospective projects, but if you take Penn Market, I believe I can quote the mayor accurately when I say that one of the elements of the detent, to not call it something else, with regards to the funding for Penn Market was, and I'll quote you, Mr. Mayor, we don't own it in terms of we, the city, we don't own it. The RDA can turn around after we inject the ARPA funding and they can sell it for $1. And that's paraphrasing, but I believe that's an accurate quote. It's an astute observation for the committee chairwoman to ask what makes this different. And how would your relationship actually play out in terms of all the moving pieces for such an enormous project that you're now proposing to council? And again, I don't like the pace of activity. It seems we get things brought to the table when it's always full pedal to the floor. and there's not much we can do. I don't want to hear about we have to react to the market. You are the foremost disruptors when it comes to the market. You are you stall the market at will whenever you can. You use every mechanism to do it, except for when it's time for us to make a deliberative decision. It doesn't sit well with me. And again, just going off the track record, not necessarily the leaders that we have at play here. Great respect for you. Definitely great respect for council. And of course, Blanda, please keep bringing the ideas forward. With this one, far, far, far too risky. I don't agree with the assessment of a 2 at a risk level. It's a solid 5. This is, to me, the definition of catching a falling knife.
Thank you. Is there any further comment from the public?
Yeah, I have one follow-up comment, please. The assessment of risk when dealing with purchasing something is what are other willing participants, what are other people willing to pay for it? And I believe, and every indication is there, that any bid that the city puts forward is going to be in the range, barely winning or potentially losing. And when you barely win an auction in something like real estate, unless you are immediately, in the 2008 situation, unless you're hitting the bubble and everything drops out, it is likely that real estate is going to be worth 2%, 3%, 5%, 10% more next year than it is now. As Blanda pointed out, when you buy 30 parcels for a price and then you sell them one at a time, you are likely going to get more money per parcel than what you paid. That's how wholesale versus retail works. People buy things in bulk and then they sell them for a little bit more individually. So I'm going to stand by my low risk because we're not purchasing an idea. We're not purchasing a startup company. We're not purchasing something that's out there. We're purchasing land. We're purchasing buildings that people have already shown interest in. We've already got bids on some of these buildings. Whether we approve those uses or not, that's a different topic, and that's why I want to see council and myself in control of this property, so that we can sell it to the folks that are going to do what we want to see done in our community. So I agree with you that I am not always on the same side of the decisions as the RDA. I think more than 9 times out of 10 I am. Every once in a while we disagree, and that happens, just like we disagree 1 out of 10 times vehemently, but we disagree 1 out of 10 times. I trust that we can work out a process with the RDA where your elected officials who you put in charge to control the future of this city have enough control, and we utilize the RDA as the tool that it is of the city, created by the city for redevelopment, for this exact purpose. I feel pretty confident about this. Finally, I am sorry for the rush, but yeah, when an owner of 17 acres says they're only taking bids until May the 6th, there is no roadblock that the city can put up. We can't stop that. So while we were working diligently for 8, 10, 12 months, when did I have a tour of the property? This last summer. The county commissioners have been in on the property, other developers. We've all been working on this and building up to some kind of plan. But then somebody just said, hey, you got 15 days to get your number in. And we either put a number in or we don't. And that's why we're here tonight. If we don't put in a number, then we don't. And whoever wants to come in from out of town will do what they want, essentially, with that 17 acres. We have a little bit of control because they can't put housing there right now unless we make some kind of change, council and the mayor make some kind of change or alteration. So we do have a little bit of control. I'm not going to deny that, but we don't have the global control that we would have to help out the school district, to help out the housing authority, to help put pieces together that create 17 acres of what York City residents want to see. So that's why I'm supporting this. Otherwise, I wouldn't support the ARPA money going to this. But that, in combination with the idea that it's going to return that money back to us so we can utilize it for other purposes, so that we can have that win now and the windfall later that we can put back into blight reduction, back into the other purposes. That's why I'm sold on this. I don't like risking the city's money, and I don't consider this a risk.
Thank you, Mayor. As we bring this discussion item to close, I just want to remind Blanda that we expect a resolution to be submitted to the clerk by tomorrow to be included on the council's agenda for May 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to rules and admin code. And that is chaired by Councilman Rivera.
I'd like to introduce.
Point.
I forgot to make the motion to place it on the agenda.
Thank you.
That last item.
I was just going to ask that. Sorry, thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, they just said we're doing, what's the resolution? I'm sorry. What's the resolution? Yeah, the letter of intent resolution. On there, it just said discussion because there was nothing, but during the course of our discussion, we talked about a resolution of, what'd you say? Letter of intent for council to consider. And you want that on the May 3rd agenda, correct? Because May 6th is when it's all going down.
Yeah, but it's really not voting this out of committee because the committee item and on the worksheet is the ARPA funding. This is a little bit separate, so I don't know technically if you're voting this out of committee or if this.
No, we're
the
not.
LOI is the letter of intent is a separate.
That's
issue.
separate.
Yeah.
Mhm. So we can go ahead and do the letter of intent for the resolution.
Want to do it?
Thank you. The administration intends to submit it for your agenda. Thank you.
Okay. I make a motion to approve a resolution to be submitted for a letter of intent to be provided for the May 2nd agenda. Third agenda, May 3rd agenda. I apologize.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
All in favor say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no.
All right, that will appear on the May 3rd agenda. Now we will move on to rules and admin code chaired by Councilman Rivera.
I would like to introduce discussion on Article 160, is it 185? Yes, the Crown Act. Is anyone here to discuss Article 185, the Crown Act?
Good evening, Council. Stephanie Seaton. Sorry. Excuse me. Chair of the City of York's Human Relations Commission. I'm here on behalf of the Commission in support of Article 185 being amended to include the Crown Act, which is creating a respectful and open world for natural hair. This was approved by our Board of Commissioners at the April the 18th meeting to amend our ordinance to include the Crown Act after a lot of discussion with councilwomen at the Queen of Washington, a lot of work with Diana Thompson-Mitchell, as well as the Assistant City Solicitor, to look at the language and to look at what other states are doing. Now, we believe in this amendment. I can speak from personal experience of being discriminated against. I've been wearing natural hair for probably close to 30 years now. I had locks in my hair. I've worn braids. Y'all probably see me, I've been doing this probably for the last 10, 15 years, I don't know. But I have experience with all sorts of experiences with my hair and being discriminated against, people touching my hair, all of those sort of things. And I know that we've seen in the news the trauma associated with individuals having their hair cut in schools. This would cover that because it would be covered in employment, housing, and public accommodation under our ordinance. And schools are covered under public accommodations. But also in the workplace, there's been complaints about discrimination based on hair. So we believe in this amendment. We think it's worthwhile to add to the ordinance because it's hard to, when you have to go that extra mile and present a race-based case, and it has to do with the hair, then you have to tie all of that in to race. And here, after much discussion, we did not want to further define race to include hair because that didn't make sense, but to have it as its separate protected class. So this would add additional protections to the City of York's Human Relation Ordinance, and that additional protected class would be the Crown Act, would be and if I could read a little bit of the language, it includes hairstyles to mean hair textures and styles of hair of any length, such as protective or cultural hairstyles, natural hairstyles, and other forms of hair presentation. So that's where it would be added in terms of protected class. But throughout the ordinance, we do define what that means because individuals might not know what that means. What's hairstyles, what's textures, what's length, So it's further defined as protective and cultural hair textures and hairstyles means hairstyles and hair textures most commonly associated with race, including but not limited to braids, cornrows, locks, bantu knots, afros, twists, whether or not the hair extensions or treatments are used to create or maintain any such style, and whether or not the hair is adorned by any ornaments, beads, or head wraps. Individuals have been asked to remove their head wraps if it wasn't for a religious reason that they were wearing it. So we think that this is, we take very seriously opening up the ordinance to amend it. Let me just first say that. That's not something that every wave or trend that goes by, we think, oh, let's add that to our protected classes. Because people are discriminated against for many different reasons. Unfortunately, all of them are not unlawful reasons, but we thought this worthy to include in the City of York's Human Relation Ordinance. And I want to thank Councilwoman Equina Washington for all her research that she's did on this and working with the commission. There are currently, I think, 12 or 13 states that have this as a part of their state legislation. And I would just say from New York down to Virginia, it's part of every state except for Pennsylvania. And that's unfortunate. But we would be pleased to be to have it included in our ordinance, as our ordinance has offered additional protections that the state doesn't include for a long time. So I don't know if you have any questions, but I just wanted you all to know that the commission supports this amendment, and we would like to have the support of council.
Chairwoman, I just want to say your hair looks beautiful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just don't touch it.
Trust me, I would not.
Yes.
And don't talk about it at the Oscars.
Yeah.
I did not go there.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you for all the work that you put in, Councilwoman Washington, with this, and for the commission. To my understanding, this was, as you said, it's not just something that you just approved. There was a lot of discussion in regards to this and thought, and it's something unfortunate that it has to be addressed, but I'm glad and I hope that we continue to support in regards to this resolution. So thank you for all your work.
And I just want to add a thank you to Chairwoman Seaton and to all of the commissioners on the Human Relations Commission for really taking the time. And I know that you guys do take it seriously with opening this act and amending it to include this. This is very near and dear to my heart. I've worn my hair natural for the last 20 years of my life in various hairstyles. And I've been brought up around here all my life. And our hair is our crown. And it is beautiful. And, you know, this is not just for today, but it's for the generation of the other little boys and little girls that will go to school or grow up or go to work or whatever, to understand the importance that they do not have to change their hair to conform and to fit into an ideation that was given to them that this is what professionalism looks like. This is their natural hair, and their natural hair is what professionalism looks like. And so I just want to say thank you to you, thank you to the commissioners, thank you to our clerk, and thank you to everyone that worked on this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do we
I
have
just
any
want to
further
say thank you as well. Go ahead, I'm sorry. No, I just wanted to say thank you as well, because I'm also natural, and I love my naturalness. So this is very important. And as Councilwoman said, our youth should not have to worry about, or anyone should have to worry about their hairstyles and how they wear them. But it should be embraced. So thank you for all the hard work. Anyone that had their hand in it, thank you all.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilwoman Dennis.
Any other discussion? No. Mr. Gomez?
Manuel Gomez, York City. This one brings me a lot of joy. We are blessed to have such wonderful examples, relatable and sensible examples of what this professionalism looks like and the beauty that entails something that drives what we call now the Crown Act. We have at Queen of Washington, of course, Stephanie Seaton. All along the seaboard, the same thought came to mind, that we were one of those that didn't have this. As somebody that's moved around a lot, it's always struck me as odd. The time is now. Sometimes I want to say it's one of those things where if you know, you know, but the truth is it should actually be understood that these were social mores that were imposed on us as a people through various mechanisms and ways. It's still there. The remnants of this are there. Those social mores have been ingrained in what's touted as professionalism and not professionalism. Sometimes you turn the TV on, you think you're looking back decades, but it's okay because what we have here stands as a shining example. I love this when the government comes together and does something that is actually joyous and shows some growth, shows some progress, shows we can come together and actually learn from the past and move forward in a lot stronger way. I love it. Thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you.
Motion to send it to the legislature. I move to send this to the legislative agenda on May 3rd.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? And moving on to residency.
I would like to introduce discussion on Article 165, the Residency Act. Can we get some discussion?
Sure. The residency amendments have been before you since, I believe, November 2019, and we're asking that you bring these forward and address the issues in the administration of the business of the City of York. We have been having difficulties in recruiting individuals. We all know that we have two major restrictions in recruiting individuals for the City of York, and that is that we can pay whatever the citizens essentially can pay. So we can't always, we're not like a big money-making business where we can always offer the top salaries. We do try to offer great benefits here at the City of York and offset some of that salary expense. But those those items are really restricted by how much we are willing to tax our residents. And taxing our residents more, we are trying to make not an option because we are one of the highest taxed communities in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So the other restriction on us acquiring talented individuals is the residency requirement. Many individuals, as recently as this week with the Bureau of Health, I just got another report of an individual who was considering becoming a maternal child health care, got hair on the brain, sorry, maternal child health care nurse, someone whose job it is to go into the homes of young pregnant women and who may not have access to health care and help them with their pregnancy. And they specifically said the residency requirement is what stopped them from taking employment here at the City of York, which means that many more mothers will not be able to get assistance because that person and that person didn't take the job, and we don't have a whole slew of people lined up. I think there are some folks here from the Bureau of Health that are going to be able to speak on specifically on the Bureau of Health better. So I'll reserve that for them. But we have a finance department where we are currently 2 individuals down and a contractor down who is now out for, well, they're out temporarily. And we are having trouble keeping up with paying the basic bills such that it is interfering with the function of the departments of the City of York. We just had a conversation again today. It is a fact that residency is harming the functioning of the city government. It was an experiment that has wavered back and forth. Thank you, Ms. Diana Thompson-Mitchell, for sharing with us all the history, the ups and downs of the residency requirements here in the City of York. It was really interesting to learn. I was unaware that back in 2010, Council had approved the elimination of the residency requirements, but then the mayor had vetoed that. I can tell you that I will not veto if you pass this, I will not veto it. What we are asking for is the residency to be required within any adjacent county of the City of York. We believe that keeps people close enough to us that they are here and can get to work, and but it opens up the pool, it opens up the choices that they have and that we have to get qualified candidates for these open positions. I think close to 10% of the positions in the City of York right now are open, many of which have been open for extended periods of time. So we would request that the council move this to the agenda for May the 3rd, for introduction on May the 3rd, and we would request that the council approve the amendments to the residency requirements for employees of the City of York. One last thing, for the 98 employees affected by the residency requirement, which is another issue. We've got over 360 employees, but only 90, some of them are actually affected by this requirement. So that is a workplace practice that is frowned upon, to require something of 25% of your employees that is not required of the other 3/4 of the employees. So I would ask the council rectify that issue. Thank you.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. I just wanted to add, Kim Robertson. At the moment, I'm interim business administrator, but I have spent nearly 10 years working in the Office of Human Resources, and I've started in recruiting and up to managing, and this is dealing with residency. I spoke to council in 2010 when we brought this up. Facebook reminds me yearly that we were very close at that point to revoking the residency requirement, and that it fell through. But in addition to what the mayor said about hiring, I wanted to make sure it was noted, it's not just hiring, it's retaining our employees, because we do have issues hiring and getting people in the door. But over my time, I've also seen opportunities that, depending on the position, people come in, a lot of times we have issues that we need people who have experience. And sometimes that experience comes with age, and with age comes life changing, and people start establishing families, and they are literally owning homes or renting properties that are feet outside of the city limits, and they have the skill set that would be so beneficial to the city as a whole, to the citizens, to keep us functioning and to work on all these excellent projects that we have coming down the line. But they're not going to uproot their family in order to comply with our residency requirement. And then the other thing on that is that we get people, say, younger and in the door, and they're with us and they love being with us, but life changes, and they get to a point that coming in the door is not an issue for them to move into the city, or they're already residents. I was a resident when I started, and obviously still am, but you get to a point that life changes, and to tell these individuals that you're excellent employees and we appreciate you being here, but if you decide to move your family, you can't work for us anymore, is detrimental. And we've lost a lot of good employees that we could have very well kept into retirement because life changes and they wanted the opportunity and the freedom to choose where they were living, and that they did not feel that the value of their work or what they could do for the city is tied to where they lived. So I wanted to just make sure that was brought in. Immediate issues are coming in the door, you're getting people in the door, but I know of plenty of individuals at the moment who, because of whatever reason it might be, are considering looking for other employment because they want to be able to find housing outside of our 5.2 square miles.
Thank you. And I did want to represent one of the individuals, and that is Cliff Kern, who already spoke to you at a previous council meeting, and just say that I spoke with him on Monday, and he is interested in moving his family out of the city after years of giving his all to this city. If that occurs, we have no succession plan for the White Rose Television, and we don't know where we could get somebody so talented, so committed to the city of York. So this has, and actually I want to bring up one other thing. So this has big implications. A lot of them maybe you don't see every day, but this one you are going to see, because White Rose Television will go away unless somebody as great as Cliff has been steps forward, some resident of the city of York steps forward to take that on. We don't have any plan of how to keep White Rose Television on the air. I also wanted to speak, something was reminded to me, and that individual could not make the meeting. Every employee of the city of York is having to work harder right now. So you think that the pandemic is putting pressure on you. You think that things are frustrating. You think that there are mental health issues going on. There are. Now, add that to the fact that we just had an individual quit because another individual quit because they felt like they were having to do 3 jobs at the same time because we weren't able to hire the other. So it's not just... there's so many levels to the damage that this is causing. It's causing physical and mental health damage to individuals. It's causing strife in their personal lives. It's causing them to make really, really tough decisions between their work and their families that they really shouldn't have to make. So I promised that individual that because they couldn't make it here, I would speak to that issue as well.
Any other discussions on the residency requirement? Ms. Seaton?
Wait.
Oh,
Council first.
Oh, council.
Yeah, mhm.
Okay. Council? Councilwoman Dennis? Did you have some?
Okay, just for the Article 165.06B, can you just talk a bit about the preference for residents in the city of York when it comes to HR?
Absolutely. There has been and there continues to be a preference during interviews for residents of the city of York. That would not go away. We want to hire. I mean, the intent of the residency is great. The intent of wanting to provide jobs for our residents is something that we stand by. It's just we haven't gotten enough resident applicants to fill the positions that we need to fill. So we do now, and we had a case not too long ago where the scores were very, very close. And one individual was a couple points behind, but because of the residency, they were actually chosen. And when I say a couple points, that really means that they're basically equivalent. They're really, they're so close. But that person got those extra points and became an employee of the city of York. So that will not go away. We will continue in our HR practices to promote residency and to reward residency.
Thank you. Not a question, but just a follow-up in regards to the morale. And this would be a perfect opportunity to throw my plug in when it comes to the ARPA recommendation recovery plan in regards to looking at some type of essential employee bonus, as well as looking at premium pay. And then when it comes to our HR procedures, there have been at times where I've talked with individuals who have applied and they haven't even heard anything back from the HR department. So I just want to say, in regards to that, we do have to do, I know that you're stretched thin, but we do have to do a much better job when it comes to communication. Even if individuals are applying for the jobs and they may not meet qualifications, et cetera, they at least deserve the common courtesy for a response back from the city of York.
We do have it set up as part of our application system that everyone who applies gets acknowledgement that their application was accepted. The issue that we have is, depending on the position, and it is, I have a limited staff that, in order to communicate back to everyone saying that, we're limited to what we can say as well in terms of people want reasoning as to why they weren't picked, and it's sometimes it's not in the best interest of the city in terms of our process of fair employment to share details. So sometimes I am concerned about what type of response people expect, and maybe that's something I can look into with the other cities in terms of third-class cities in terms of what do they provide back. But we are limited in terms of staffing and the ability to reply back more than we did accept your application and that it's in review. That has been a discussion and has come up before, and it is kind of one of those processes that we are limited in our technology and our employees to be able to personally respond back to the applications. And it's twofold, because we're here saying we're not getting applicants. At the same time, there's other processes that the individual responsible for recruiting also handles. So it is difficult to be able to promise that we are going to personally email back every individual, but we do strive to try to make better use of our applicant system, so that at the very least, if it's an additional email that goes out saying that it was reviewed at this point, we're not going to give any further consideration, but please keep an eye out for future opportunities. So we will continue to look at that.
Thank you.
Any other discussion from council?
I would like to just ask one thing that Monica brought up to me that I thought was a good question. In section, in the ordinance, 16507E says all new employees, once their residence in the city is established, shall be required to maintain residence within the county of York. Shouldn't it just say all new employees shall be required to maintain within, like that first part is like wrong, right?
I'm sorry, what page are you on?
Yeah, it should say, that is an amendment as well. It should say, once their residence is established in York County or any counties contiguous with York County, they shall be required to maintain residence in York County or contiguous counties during their employment. That is correct.
Yes.
So that edit can be made.
I have a question. So why don't we just open it up the residency requirement? Why does it have to be contiguous? If
There-
we're opening up the residency
There is
requirement.
a certain amount of logic in having people live kind of close so that they're not like 2 hours away and every time it snows or rains hard, they say that I can't make it to work. There is a certain amount of logic to that. I think that there are some cases where we may have some contractors that may be able to work from further distances, but I don't think as a basic standard, living more than I mean, this really puts at least an hour. It kind of puts at least an hour radius, even more than that, because I mean, you could live with this in Baltimore County. You can live in Western Cumberland County. It gives you a pretty good distance, but how much do you want to trust somebody driving from Pittsburgh every day to come to work? That there aren't going to be issues down the road. I mean, this is again, we were trying to find some kind of reasonable ground to expand the current highly restrictive residency. Removing residency, swinging the pendulum the entire way to no construct whatsoever, to no boundaries whatsoever, had not been contemplated or discussed. If that is part of the discussion at the next meeting, or if you wish to have that part of the discussion, we can have that discussion. I don't want to throw it out right away, but off the top of my head, I've shared with you my concerns about having people living much, much further away than what is already a generous range of South Central Pennsylvania and Northern Maryland.
I think if we're going to open up the residency requirement, you just open it up and you don't keep it to the contiguous counties around York County. I think you just, I think we're at a point here that we're bringing this up. I'm hoping to move it forward to the legislative meeting. I say if you're going to open it up, you just open it up. So my feelings on residency requirement, and I've progressed on this because I was adamantly opposed to lifting the residency requirement when I ran for council, and as I've gotten to attend some meetings that were hosted and hearing from the people that are living in the city and would like to and are talented. I just think that we've progressed. It's 2022, and I certainly believe that York is a progressive city, and we are not allowing ourselves to grow with talent that might not be from the city. And so, however, having said all that, I am a proponent that we hire the best and brightest, but at the same time, that black and brown folks get considered for these positions as well. And that's why when we talk about the contiguous counties, I feel like, well, at least it's not just York County, because your chances of hiring Caucasians are going to be higher if it was just York County. So I think the argument, and I talked to Philip about this when he was the chief of staff, was that you were opening yourselves to be able to hire those in Baltimore County and Lancaster County and in counties that were more diverse. I don't think you need that personally. But I think, I don't like to hear that black and brown folks don't apply. That's a lazy argument. I think you need to go out, the administration, and have tables at career fairs and in other cities and steal from talent from other cities. And I think that's part of the job, but that people don't apply for these jobs is just a lazy argument for me. So, and I'm going to stay on top of it. But I think we're at a point now that we've got departments that are suffering from the lack of people that are qualified for those positions that live in the city. And I think, for me, it's about ensuring that the city moves forward with filling these positions that make the job for everyone else much tougher. And I look at Monica because she's probably the one that suffers the most from this. But we have to make a concerted effort, Kim, that black and brown folks are considered for these positions, qualified black and brown folks. And to me, that's extremely important.
Just to follow up with that, my goal is always to hire the most qualified individual for the job. In terms of your goal, Councilmember Rivera, it does go back to getting a wide variety, diverse applicant pool, so that we can't make decisions based on race for hiring, but we can encourage our applicant pool to be diverse so that that's not a factor, that we're still picking the most qualified individual for the job. In terms of, you said, going out to fairs and stuff, I will tell you the number one issue we've had when we've gone to these events is they say, do you have to live in the city? It's the first thing. And then after a while, no one's coming to our table because word's gotten around. They're like, oh, don't even worry about it. You're gonna have to move or whatnot. The one other thing I thought in terms of diversity and the idea of getting folks who don't currently live in the city or may never lived in the city, but who wants to come and be a positive impact in the city. Perfect example is some of the most recent police officer hires that we had. Is that Commissioner Muldrow has been bringing in people with the idea that, we were able to get a lot of folks that grew up in the city and even some that have moved out to West York, but they're still dedicated to the city. But we also have those group of people that grew up in, out in central or suburban, but they want to make an impact in the city. So you've got to remember that we are excluding those folks who could have such an impact, no matter what their ethnicity or race might be, to the people in the city if we can open this up. And back to the idea of contiguous or not, keeping in mind this is essentially the same exact ordinance that you see today that was presented in November 2019. And at that time, obviously, our goal is trying to expand it. That is what was proposed as a possibility. So on my end, I understand what the mayor says about, people not living too far away, but as long as we can expand it or eliminate it, I'm completely in favor because that's what we need to do.
Thank you.
And I would just like to reiterate what has happened in the police department regarding our demographics there. When just 2 years ago, we were approximately 9% non-white male. So 91% all white male police force. We are now 30% people of color and women. So, tripling the diversity in just a year and a half with no residency requirement.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
I'm just going to request that administration make the amendment and submit it to the clerk by Thursday at noon. Is that our date?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Thank you.
Can you make that happen?
I can have it in Diana's inbox before.
Well, good.
Thank you.
Any other council discussion? Any discussion from our guests? please come to the mic and state your name.
Stephanie Seaton. Good evening. I do have a question with the hiring preference for city residents. Are there points associated with that? My question was, are there points associated with the hiring preference, such as, veterans get points, police
Yes,
and
yes.
things
I
of that
can't.
nature?
I
So-
can't give you the exact. I am thinking that it is like 5. That it is like 5 points,
Okay.
but I can't give you what that percentage is of the total points. I do remember in the case that I was describing before, the person was 2 points less than the other, and it put them, I think, 1 or 2 percentage points. It put them 1 or 2 percentage points above by getting the residency benefit. So it's right in that
Okay, I just
2
wanted
or
to.
3%.
And I just wanted to make sure like there were points associated, because then it could become subjective. Preference is a subjective term.
Yeah.
So if there's points associated with it that says, hey, they scored this, but because they're a city resident, they get this little,
Yes.
however many points it is. So I just was.
We try our best to make the subjective process of hiring as objective as possible. So during our interviews, we have a series of questions, and depending on our internal process is generally 10 points per question. And then that number of questions might vary a little bit depending on what kind of interview it is, how much information we need. And then there will be a couple of percentage point benefit for the residency requirement. So, and what we also do is we have 3 people or so interviewing usually, and afterwards, if we are too far apart, we have a discussion internally to try and make sure we get to a number that we agree on, or within a range of 2 points. So between 5 and 7, or 7 and 9, so that we all come to a place where we feel that the person got a fair number, and so it goes through this effort of subjective into objective, back to a little bit of subjective into, you know what I mean? It's you're evaluating people's personalities and their skills in answering questions. So it's always going to be a bit subjective, but we try to make it as numeric as possible.
Right, and that's what I was asking, if there was a numeric point associated with the preference. And I've gone through that process that you just described, and it has worked out. So one, I want to thank Human Resources and the mayor, because we've done some hiring at the commission, and so just the back and forth and the working with your department, that has been very helpful. And currently, we are advertising for an executive director for the Human Relations Commission. The commission hasn't had an executive director since 2013. And so we're very interested in getting the best candidate possible, offering a comparable wage, a salary associated with that position. But I want to talk about a different aspect regarding this residency, this amendment to Article 165, and that is that we are in the midst of a housing crisis. We just had this commission just sponsored a housing symposium this past Monday, and from the Realtors Association of York and Adams County to CPC, who's helping with the emergency rental assistance, to Affordable Housing Advocates, Crispus Addicts York, all of those individuals talked about the need for housing in our community and a lack thereof of affordable, quality, safe housing. It's not just unique to York at this particular time, but nationwide, there is a housing crisis. So even someone who accepts a position and says, I have 6 months to move into the city, it might not be 6 months, because from the experts, we've heard that this trend isn't going to change anytime soon. The way the housing market is, it's not changing anytime soon. You've heard it said with the developers here, there hasn't been a lot of development of housing property or land here in the city for a while. There's just a lack of housing, which impacts the ability to be a resident. If you're looking for a job, you need housing. So I just wanted to insert that we're in the midst of a housing crisis right now, and it really is a crisis. One of the things that we always say in fair housing, which I have worked in fair housing for over 20 years, is fair housing is a choice. and it should not necessarily be dictated by your place of employment. You know, so I just wanted to insert the housing component here and to say that during this time, there is a crisis going on. It's hard to find housing, if just period. It's just hard to find housing right now. So I just wanted to put that out there for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eaton. Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Sharon Smith, and I'm a city resident. And I'm here today speaking as the chair of the city's Bureau of Health Board. And that's a small group of people who operated in an advisory capacity for the York City Health Bureau. And the board members are a diverse group. Dr. George Fitch is here as a city resident. The woman who had been next to me, Carmen Bones, had a long career as a social worker with WellSpan, and she still interprets and is an advocate. I think they're both advocates for minority populations. And Carmen, I wish she could have been here to say how much she appreciates the City Health Bureau's effort to work with disparate populations and comment on all the new populations and that are coming to York and the languages that are presenting a barrier to people accessing the health system. Did you have anything to say, George?
Yes. Ms. Seaton just gave a perfect example on when you have people coming into the city trying to find housing. Many times you have families doubling and tripling up just so that they can escape some of the atrocities that brought them to the United States. When you look at the Haitian Creole population, it's continuing to expand. When you look at the Latinx population, they're continuing to grow. When you look at the residency requirement, especially as it deals with the health department in the city and the lack thereof, and I know Ms. Monica Kruger won't speak on the number of days that she spent at the health department. As her neighbor, there were weeks and almost months on time that you did not see her. Monica, you would just see her in a flash because she was coming home, getting a change of clothes, then going back to the health department. I need you to really understand that the residents will be in dire straits if we cannot continually keep trained, helpful, educated health workers. When we say we're down to the bare bones, it's down to the bare bones. It's down to the white meat. Okay? It's down to the white. It's down to the marrow. You understand? It is that severe to looking at, we do not want our health department to close. You have to understand that the residents, whether it's dealing with the pregnancy population, whether it's dealing with vaccinations, whether it's dealing with now with the health, with the pandemic, all matter crises are dealing with the York City, I want to say it again, York City Health Department. We're fortunate that we have a health department in the city. And we need to really look at the residency requirement because we need to get qualified people to continue to help all the residents of York City.
Okay, thanks, George. Yeah, the York City Health Bureau is one of 11 municipal and county health departments that contract with the state to provide public health services to their residents. And I'm not sure if your understanding or knowledge of public health, but in a nutshell, it takes a population-based approach to disease prevention, health promotion, protecting the citizens, preparedness, and it does this by partnering with other groups and agencies. And the core of public health is in the city health department or bureau's mission statement, which is to promote and protect the health and well-being of York City. And the last few years, as Mr. Rivera mentioned, has been terribly challenging for everybody, but especially for public health providers. When that virus invaded our country, there was a really sharp learning curve, learning how the virus operated, how to protect people, vaccine development, how administering vaccine. And the York City health staff really stepped up to become a local leader in educating and protecting our citizens. And it all taxed the Bureau. It taxed the whole system, really. And over the last couple of years, there's been a large turnover in staff. And since the staff was subject to Article 165 of the residency, it required people could be taken on as an employee for 6 months, but then would have to live in the city. And during the COVID state of emergency, the governor issued an executive order waiving that requirement for the York City Health Bureau. And that emergency declaration is in effect till the end of May. But reinstatement of those residency requirements for the York City Health Bureau will be problematic in a number of ways. First of all, there's a shortage of healthcare workers nationwide. Nurses are being offered big bonuses and in higher wages from the private sector. Plus, York City has very limited number of nurses who live within the city, and most of them, like myself, are retired. Businesses are struggling to hire and raising wages, and the York City Health Bureau pay scale is not really competitive with other employers. But and that's another issue altogether, but the residency requirement of the 19 current York City Health Bureau employees, 12 are non-residents, and for many reasons, including housing, say they cannot move into the city. And the Bureau just cannot afford to lose this many experienced public health workers. One that really is, that when I learned of it was really disturbing, is that in the last 2 years, 8 qualified applicants for the Emergency Preparedness Grant Manager position have declined the job after being offered it based on residency requirements and the pay scale. Now, this is a multi-million-dollar contract that has no one able to give full attention to its management. Right now, there's a contracted part-time person and the Health Bureau's management staff that are trying to manage that funding, get in the reports and the deliverables. And that isn't the only position. The Health Bureau is looking for a clinic manager, an emergency preparedness program manager, 3 community health nurses, and a community health specialist. And that health specialist position was one where the person was offered the job and declined last Friday on residency. The nurse for immunizations, TB, communicable diseases, has submitted their resignation. So these vacancies result in staff doing multiple jobs, stepping in to assist with everything from ordering supplies, to collecting data and filing all these reports. And they're working hard, but we know there's a limit to time and energy. And at the present time, there's millions of dollars in grants available from the state and federal government, but there must be oversight, and the agency must show capacity to execute the purpose of the grant. And the Board of Health is concerned about what will happen if the staff cannot be hired and deliverables cannot be met. So therefore, the York City Health Bureau Advisory Board recommends the residency requirement for city employment be permanently rescinded.
Any other discussion on residency requirement, please?
Well, I would be remiss if I have sat here this long and then didn't say anything. But speaking as an elected official myself, all of the things that have been said tonight have had a major impact on the operation of the city. Dear Kim, she's not only the person currently as the HR director, she's the business administrator, and she's even the payroll clerk. So we're really short. I've been short of position since October, where I lost a phenomenal deputy treasurer who the stress was too much, and that's what it was. The treasurer's office has been open every day since all through COVID. We survived the loss of our computer equipment and our telephone service for 3 months. That was a real trial to shift everything back to paper accounting and out of the software program. We're in the process of initiating not only our new financial system, but also our new budgeting system went into operation last year. And this year I was blessed with having to have a new tax collection system because the old program that we had is no longer being supported. So for all the many reasons that you've heard tonight, I do hope you'll give this serious consideration as we move forward. And if you know any people looking for accounting jobs, just like nursing jobs, we got several openings around here, and we would love to have someone to help out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffco.
I just wanted to speak to the grant part of this whole residency thing. When working with health, they have the money to pay for them, but the residency piece is really what hurts them because they have the money to pay for the person, the EPM, I'm going to say it wrong, but the grant manager, they have the money to do that, but they can't do it if we have the residency. So it's like for myself, I did not want to move into the city. And technically, hopefully, I'll be able to move out of the city just because I'm not a city girl. It's not my preference. Nothing's wrong with York. Love work with it. But it's not my preference. And so what I think sometimes the residency requirement does is takes away, if you want to work, it takes away your preference of where you will live. And that is not something anyone else should be able to decide. I mean, it is your choice to decide if you want to work or not, which I did do that, so it's not a problem. But some people have that where they can't. So I used to drive an hour and a half, and if you are a person who wants to drive for a job, you will. So I just want to speak to us eliminating it totally, because you're telling a person when they can come to work and how long it's going to take them, and you don't know how fast I speed, so therefore I can get there in 20 minutes. But I'm just saying we should be able to let a person live and work and play, which is what York is supposed to do.
Thank you, Ms. Baldwin. Just for the record, York is the best place on earth.
Monica Kruger, York City Bureau of Health employee, Director of the Health Bureau. I just personally wanted to thank our board members for being here and for your words. And I don't think anything else really needs to be said. I've spoken several times over the years. I've been with the city for 14 years. I think I've been loud and proud about it. My husband worked for the city, retired from the city. But I don't really think anything else needs to be said. I think we've said it time and time again. The time has come. It's a no-brainer. We need to do what is best for our city residents. And right now, what's best for our city residents is removing the city residency requirement so we can hire the folks who want to do the work, who are doing the work. Because as already been said, if it's not rescinded, we will no longer have a health bureau as soon as that emergency declaration goes away. Thank you.
I do have one thing to say, Monica. You got to promise you're not going to move out of the city.
I am. My roots are here. I no.
There might be tears. Just fair warning. I need to say first that I'm speaking to you on behalf.
I'm sorry, I know you've been here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Chastity Frederick. I live at 313 West Cottage Place since 2006. I've been an employee of the City Health Bureau since 2016. And I am a registered nurse that works with the Maternal Child Health Program. I first need to say this. First off, I'm standing here before you today not for me. I'm standing before you today because there are people that are currently not being served, not being cared for, and being cared for by staff that have been overworked and underpaid for a significant amount of time. I'm not certain if you know what the Health Bureau does, and some of that has been mentioned tonight, but I think that it bears your attention. The Health Bureau offers HIV and STD testing and a sexual wellness clinic. If you're uncertain of the rates of HIV new cases and STD, including syphilis, which in my world also causes congenital syphilis, which causes lifelong impact on children. Our rates here in the city are high above the rates in the rest of Pennsylvania, frankly. That is not my area of expertise, so I'm just going to let that sit there. We also have a tuberculosis program. We used to do PPD testing. We do treatment. If you're not aware, there are and continue to be patients within the city of York who require TB testing and treatment in order to protect you and me and their families. We offer a child immunization program, and this speaks to many of the things that many of us are concerned about, and that is increasing not only our care, but the diversity of the population that we serve and the diversity of our staff that is serving the population in any space. The employment, the church attendance, the attendance at restaurants should represent the population that they are serving. You may not know this about me. Clearly, I am not a person of color. Thank you, Diana. But I want to be clear that this is near and dear to my heart as well. And I need to say this to you because I have brothers who are brown and brother-in-laws who are black. And I want you to hear that from me because this is important work. This is important work. I'm not certain if you're aware that our communicable disease program has to investigate every positive result that comes in that is reportable to the Department of Health. Lyme disease, for instance. You can't report it if you don't have the staff to do that. You can't provide the appropriate education, promotion, and prevention if you don't have the staff to do it. And then in my world, which I know much more about, maternal child health. I'm not certain if you're aware of the statistics, but York ranks one of the lowest in terms of poor outcomes in the state of Pennsylvania for infant and maternal morbidity and mortality. Preterm births in the city of York are at about 13.1%, compared to the state of Pennsylvania, which is about 9.4%. And indeed, disparities exist. Significant disparities exist. Our maternal child health team, which, by the way, is not fully staffed, and we will lose money in this fiscal year because we have not been able to hire, is currently receiving referrals for about 35% of the pregnant women who will give birth in the city of York this year. We are receiving, in general, more referrals than any municipal health department in the state of Pennsylvania. And we are currently serving caseloads of double or triple what they should be. Our maternal child health program serves women who are pregnant or parenting and who live within the city limits from any time during their pregnancy until 2 years postpartum, unless the children have special health care needs, and then we're able to follow them longer. The pandemic has exacerbated all of the things that we all knew already existed. We have all seen an increase in populations that we have not cared for before, the Haitian Creole population, for instance. Equality says we give everyone the same thing. Equity says we pay attention to what people need, and we assure that we have people, resources, talent, and input so that we can provide what each person needs individually. I tell my patients that every day. My job is not to tell you what to do. My job is to use the skills that I have to be able to empower you and advocate for you so that you can reach your full health potential. We are a health bureau, so I cannot share stories with you because that is confidential information and I take that incredibly seriously. But if I could, I would tell you story after story after story of how our team and many of the maternal child health team members are here tonight. And kudos to them for staying in the game because I've told them I know they don't have to. Our team did not stop home visiting during the pandemic. We looked like we were going in body armor, but we knew that if we stepped out, that people, particularly children, would suffer. We are now in 2022 starting to see the impact of the pandemic that it has had. Child abuse cases decreased. Severity of child abuse cases increased. Domestic violence increased. Mental health concerns not only continued, but were complicated by isolation, economic concerns, education concerns. We have children waiting for specialty appointments for months and months and months and months. And if they can't get transportation and we can't figure it out, they wait again. I'm telling you this because this work is important, because our community is important, and some of the very issues that were raised by people tonight, and I agree with wholeheartedly, could be solved if we could care for the people. The job that we do is about prevention. We have nursing students come every week from your College of Pennsylvania, and every week they come, it's a new student. I tell them the story about how I used to work inside of the walls of the hospital. And I never thought about what had to happen outside of the walls. But what happens outside of the walls, if you only care about economics, if you only care, which that is not my primary concern, but if you only care about economics, if we keep one child out of the NICU, we actually have paid for our program almost. This is important work. I'm only speaking to health because I work for them, but I think that some of the concerns that were raised by business administration could be remedied if we would remedy this. We live in a global economy. Frankly, I empathize with the sentiment about expanding the residency. I personally know people who have two homes and they might live in Pittsburgh, but they work somewhere for the week and then they go home on the weekend. And frankly, they're really good employees, and for their mental health, it actually works really well. I believe that there was good intent of the residency requirement when it was set up. I was not a part of that, but as I understand, there was good intent. I was thinking about an analogy for this. And I thought the other day, if my loved one has to go to the hospital because they've been in a motor vehicle accident, which just to boot, that was going to be my example. And while I was sitting here, I had to step out because my son was in an accident tonight. If my loved one is in an accident and has to go to the hospital, am I going to stand at the registration desk and say, hold on a second, can you tell me where you live? Because I can't be served by you if you don't live in the same space that I live. Doesn't that go against all of the things that we're trying to promote in our community in terms of unity and understanding that we need each other desperately if the pandemic has taught us nothing else? I'm not going to wait for someone who lives in my community to care for me because their residency is not a provision of their ability to hold the responsibilities of their work. Similarly, a local example here within the city of York, and I don't know the numbers exactly, so these are approximates. But I pray that none of us ever endure this, and I was going to use someone else as an example, but I'm going to use myself because I don't want to cause any distress to anyone. If my house is on fire tonight, am I going to wait and say to the firefighters that are on duty, wait a second, only 10% of you live in the city, so everybody else just go home? Because clearly you're not going to be able to take care of my burning home. Or am I going to welcome them with open arms? Because they have agreed to take on the responsibility and frankly risk their life for my family, no matter where they live. This really is what we're speaking of here. I've been a nurse for 24 years, and honestly, this is the first time I have lived in the community where I've worked. And I will tell you, as a nurse, sometimes that's awkward because there's only 5.2 square miles here, and I don't stay inside my home. And so I will often be walking, and someone's like, hey, how are you? Which is fine. I tell them if they ignore me, I'll take that as my cue that I'm not to speak to them. But you understand that for some people that might be difficult. And I asked this person if I could share this, so just so you know, I'm not breaching confidentiality. We currently have a community health specialist who is was just hired in March. We had the position open for some time. And she participated as a member of our maternal child health program. Graduated from the program. We desperately needed another medical translator because about 25% of the folks that I serve in maternal child health do not speak English as a first language. And she is now working for the City Health Bureau, from whom she benefited, and now she is giving back. I think that speaks for itself. That's what we want, right? But in order to get there, we're going to have to figure this out.
Chastity, I don't want to be rude, but we
No, you're okay.
probably have some other people that want to talk.
That's okay.
You've been up there for a little while now,
That's
so if you could
absolutely
wrap it
fine.
up, that would
I
be
figured
great.
you would just cut my mic when you had enough. I have
I love everything you're saying, but
Thank
I think
you.
there might be some other people that may
absolutely.
talk on this issue.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chastity. Any other discussion on the residency requirement?
Good evening, Council. My name is Bethany Kern. I am here to put in my 2 cents for my husband, but pardon me as I just ramble on because I am a verbal processor, so some of the things I wrote down are actually more rhetorical questions that will eventually lead somewhere, but we have heard pretty much everything I was going to mention from all these wonderful people. All the points are spot on, exactly with what I was going to say. So I'm going to just kind of fill in with some personal comments, I think. And I wasn't even planning on coming tonight, but thank God for mother-in-laws that want to run in and watch your kids so you don't have a 1.5-year-old running around. So thank you, Tina. Very happy. Okay. I know that this initial ordinance was put in place by people much smarter than me and wiser, and there was a good intent. I wasn't there. I don't necessarily know exactly what the initial intent and goal was. I'm assuming it had something to do with representation in the employment and to give first priority to people that live within the city. And maybe there was a thought that if you do live in the city, then you will automatically be invested in wanting the city to succeed. So, you don't want to not do great at your job and feel like live in the place where you're making it fail. So, obviously. But I do think that's kind of short-sighted because people who live just outside of the city limits love and support the city and want it to succeed. So my question then is, have we achieved or maintained that initial goal or intent in a meaningful way since the ordinance has been in place? So it only affects, I think the mayor said, 98 current employees. So out of those 98 employees, I'm just curious, do we have that initial goal met? That initial reason why we had the ordinance put in place, did we get there? Is it working? I'm honestly asking because I feel like what we're finding out from this is it had great intention and maybe we have more representation, but there's a problem that maybe wasn't foreseen is that we cannot hire enough people and our city is continuing to decline because of our lack of employment capabilities for hiring and then from my standpoint from retaining because Mr. Kern over there, I was a country girl. I grew up in rural Amish, barefoot children, horse and buggy, one-room schoolhouse, Pennsylvania, and met this great guy, decided to marry him, and moved down here. So I have lived here now for almost 7 years, and I've learned to love the city. And I really wouldn't even be here if I didn't care about the city, because quite frankly, as it has been mentioned previously, if we wanted to move somewhere else, Cliff could get a different job. He could get a more competitive pay. Why don't we move out to where we want to live in the country and have our beehives and have our chickens with our kids? Why do we stay in the city for this long? It's because he loves his job. He's good at his job. He's been doing his job for, 12, 13 years, and he has gone from a volunteer to PEG access coordinator to station manager to the point where this guy is running the whole entire thing and knows all of the ins and outs and the secrets, and I don't even know if anybody could step into that building and know how to take it from there. But he loves it. And to try to say, okay, well, now we're at a point in our life where our kids, we're going to be getting ready to go into school and we want to just expand and we're bursting out the seams of our house. If you drove by, I know Diana knows, our house is just exploding with kid toys everywhere and we're just moving out onto the street. Anyway, I digress. So we could quit the job and you could leave, but we haven't left because he loves his job. And I think that is the most, the strongest point that we have. We have problems with hiring, we have problems with having enough staff for the health department, and we have problems with retaining. And retaining your employees that you've had for 12 to 13 years that know what they're doing and love what they're doing, I think is the biggest issue from my personal bias standpoint. So are these achievements that we have gained through this ordinance that we have, we've had it for I don't know how many years now that it's been in place, are they worth the cost of where we are now? Is that level of whatever we achieved worth our lack of labor, our decreased mental state of our current employees being overworked and doing multiple jobs of people? I mean, I think Cliff would love an assistant person to help him out. But when he was hired, there was a station manager and him, and now it's just him. So he's, trying to do the best he can do with volunteers. So that was a different topic. But are there other methods that the city can implement to achieve the same goal? If the goal was to have more representation in the employment, I know that we're doing steps to have city residents have more points in the hiring process, but is there something else that we can look to that would not harm the city in this way? Because I think what we're seeing is it's not working. It's actually harming. I graduated college and got a job in Mechanicsburg, and I continue to work that job. I drive 40 plus minutes during the week to get there. Why do I keep working there? Because I love my job. it's a great job, and I'm willing to drive that far because I want to see that job succeed, and I love what I do. I love the people I work with. Cliff's the same way. He loves what he does. He loves coming to the city and putting his efforts in to see the success of White Rose Community Television and the city, and I don't think that's ever going to go away. So that's it. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kern.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nona Watson. I am the Director of Economic and Community Development. Sorry for being late. I had class tonight, so I don't know exactly what was said, but I just wanted to state I live here in the city, and I don't plan to move anytime soon, but I just wanted to stay in here in support of residency being lifted, because what I do know is that we all have a story to tell. We all are experiencing different things in our lives, and we should be able to make our choices about where we want to live and about where we want to work. And I welcome people who want to work in the city and may not want to live in the city. I have a choice that I'll have to make somewhere down the line because I have a mother who's 100 years old and she lives in New Jersey. Well, she's not moving. You know how it is when you get up in age, you can't make them move. So I have to think about between there and here, eventually I may have to make a decision for myself. And also I want to say for the Department of Economic and Community Development, we have, and Monica probably spoke to this already, but we have missed out on a lot of great people, and yes, our employees are overworked and they are underpaid and they are holding it down. So when the time comes, I'm just asking you all to really consider lifting residency. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? No.
I'll make a few quick points. Manuel Gomez, York City. Let's make something clear that this is just another one of those forms of statutory self-harm. This is a decades-long experiment that was inflicted and imposed upon the people by the government itself. When I made the comment earlier about the government artificially imposing itself upon the markets, stalling markets, and interfering in an undue way, and causing all those unintended consequences and effects, where they are then very quick to act, but very slow or altogether recalcitrant when it comes to responding to those unintended consequences. We've heard many stories here today that underscore that phenomenon. At its essence, you either believe that capital and resources should move freely, unencumbered by those artificial barriers, or you don't. We've, in essence, cut ourselves off from an expanded labor pool simply by decree. For me, I can just as well close my eyes and we could be standing in Texas talking about a little place below the imaginary line to the south and saying we don't want those people coming in and taking our jobs. To me, it's all the same. Again, you either believe in the free movement of labor and capital or you don't. It's an undue interference. These are unintended consequences. The government, for all of its intended or purported knowledge and fortune telling, what can we call it? How could they foresee a pandemic? How could they foresee the housing crisis? What an astute way to bring that up and show you that the government doesn't always know best. Because what you think you understand may change and flip on a dime tomorrow. But remember that the government is not so quick to respond to those changes. Think of that going forward as you consider to give the power to the government to speculate and risk freely, because this is where you end up. Decades of statutory self-harm that you can now undo. But look how long, and look at how many people had to suffer in so many tangible ways before we can finally get to this point.
I'm going to motion to move this to our legislative meeting on May 3rd.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Now we'll move on to item.
Okay, yeah, you're getting ready to say that, Kim, did you
sorry.
put the agenda, because you're probably getting ready to move on to that bill. On this agenda sheet that I just handed out this afternoon, I have under Rules and Administrative Code, a bill amending the budget to authorize expenditures of unspent grant funds from 2018 for the Health Bureau. Where did I get that from? That's nothing you gave me, right? The Health Bureau? Did you have anything?
No, I didn't have a clue what that was about.
That's a rogue line. I don't know how it got there. So, okay, nobody.
If we
no?
figure it out by noon tomorrow, we'll let you know.
Okay.
All right. Now moving on to general committee. We have a resolution, a bill for the industrial pretreatment program from the wastewater treatment plant, and that was submitted by the solicitor's office. Any discussion in regards to that?
No, it's simply as we are transitioning the wastewater collection system to Pennsylvania American, they will also be taking over our pretreatment program, and they have asked for us to assist at times when an industry may be non-compliant, if they can come back to us and ask for our assistance in some way to help make them compliant. So it's really just a request of potential future assistance. This is something that, to my knowledge, hasn't happened in the past, that generally people are compliant, but it's just kind of a thing to make sure that there's no loophole, that they can come back and ask us for help if they need it.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council? Any questions or comments from the public? I move that this item appear as a bill on our May 3rd legislative agenda. Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And moving on to conflict of interest waiver for quo warranto. And that was presented by the solicitor's office.
Yeah, I think that's moved, Madam President.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Mr. Solicitor, I would disagree.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can you repeat what you said, Mr.? He needs a.
The topic is moved. The mayor disagrees. I'm sorry.
While the immediate hearing was addressed, there is no knowledge of what the future may bring. So any kind of appeals, anything like that. So I think it does still is still a concern.
So the solicitor is saying that it's mute. Is there discussion from council in regards to this? Any questions or comments?
I mean, I don't disagree with.
Can you,
Something could come up.
can you, he needs the microphone. Sorry.
I guess I don't come here often enough. Is that the problem, Diana? I don't disagree that there is the potential down the road, even in the existing case, that there could be an appeal. But I do think it's you all know the hearing was held and it's been submitted. It's in the judge's hands. So at this point, I think that's where it stands. I think it can always get revisited if you want to do that.
Okay. I do have some questions in regards to this resolution. So this was placed or submitted by the solicitor's office, but our solicitor is saying it's mute. I'm just going to go ahead and ask my questions because I'm going by what was submitted. So my first question for the resolution, for the letter that was sent from Williamson, Freeburg, and Jones dated April 18th, Was that the basis for the language for this agenda item?
Yes.
Okay. Can you clarify for us if the opinion in this letter is the opinion of the full Bar Ethics Committee?
Well, we didn't have time to get the full, but they delegate, and I don't really know how many members on the committee there are, but there are members on the committee, and the contact that we made, they gave us an individual who had municipal experience, because the person we talked to, who was the contact point, said she didn't have municipal experience, and we were sort of talking over her head. And so she had this gentleman contact me, and we wrote a letter asking the question, and that's his answer.
So is the letter the opinion of the full Bar's Ethics Committee that was sent to us?
I can't say that it is, because I haven't asked. We didn't have time to say, well, wait a minute, would you check with the others?
So would it be admissible or usable in court, that letter that was sent to us?
Ethics opinions from the Bar Association are never admitted in court, I don't think.
Okay.
I mean, it's advice to the lawyers that ask the question.
Okay, so in the letter, can you explain at the end, it's the caveat, what this means? So at the end, it says, the foregoing opinion is advisory only and is not binding on the disciplinary board of the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania or any court. It carries only such weight as an appropriate reviewing authority may choose moreover. This is the opinion of only one member of the committee and is not an opinion of the full committee. So when I was asking in regards to is it an opinion in regards to the full committee?
Well,
I was getting to the caveat at the end of it.
No, then you clarified it. I mean, it's not the whole committee, but we didn't have time to do all that.
Well, that was the letter that was forwarded to us from Jason with no explanation. It was just forwarded to us. My next question is, on page 2 of that advisory letter, there's another quote. So I'm just taking this directly from the advisory letter. It says, the opinions expressed in this response are not dependent upon whether the city solicitor will represent Michael Helfrich as the incumbent mayor or as a private client. The capacity of which the city solicitor would represent Michael Helfrich is a legal question beyond this committee's authority. And that's the quote directly from the letter. But in the resolution that was submitted to us, it states that the Pennsylvania Bar Association Ethics Department has determined that Michael R. Helfrich qualifies to be represented by the city solicitor's office because the petition is in the course of his employment as mayor. So can you explain how we make sense of the Ethics Committee's written opinion on page 2 stating they cannot determine or qualify whether the city solicitor can represent Michael R. Helfrich as mayor as that goes beyond their authority, to the language that was actually submitted to us in the actual resolution, which says the Pennsylvania Bar's Ethics Department has determined that Michael R. Helfrich qualifies to be represented by the city solicitor's office because the petition is in the course of his employment as mayor. They're saying two different things, and the resolution that was submitted to us is saying that the Pennsylvania Bar's Ethics Department has determined.
Well, what the Bar Ethics opinion said, the question that we asked was, we represent the City of York. The City of York is an entity containing primarily two bodies. The City Council is one body and the mayor is another body. And under the rules of professional conduct, we have, under those circumstances, a concurrent conflict of interest. There's a rule, a subpart of that rule, that says that conflict can be waived, and it can be waived by informed consent. So we got that opinion from the Ethics Board, and so we therefore submitted a request to City Council that if City Council wants to grant the solicitor's office a waiver of that conflict of interest to represent the mayor. And it didn't happen. The council decided to send it to this committee, and so the mayor hired other counsel, and that's where we are.
I honestly feel like the ordinance was misleading because it's not the same language. I don't think the Pennsylvania Bar's Ethics Department determined that that the mayor qualifies to be represented by the city solicitor's office in comparison to what the letter from Friedberg, Williamson's, and Jones actually says. I think that resolution was definitely misleading.
Okay.
I have another question, or just the issue that comes about is the pay as well. And so when I'm looking at the letter, it's my understanding that the City of York nor the Office of Mayor is listed in the civil suit. So it just says Michael Helfrich. It is my understanding that the City of York nor the actual Office of Mayor is being sued. So when I look at that actual paper that was submitted with the petitioners, it just has Michael Helfrich. It doesn't have the City of York on it.
Well, that was clarified, I think, in the ethics decision, that's ethics opinion that said Mr. Helfrich is being sued in his capacity as the mayor. So it's really the same thing. I'm pretty sure he said that.
In regards to the respondent, I mean, they don't,
Yeah, he's
when
the
it has.
respondent. It's all about his duties as the mayor, so there's no other thing that it's about. It's not about him as a private citizen.
Okay, so, but the resolution was submitted based off the advisory letter, and in that advisory letter, the one committee person that submitted his opinion gave his advice that he couldn't really, well, he could not give advice in regards to whether the city could represent Michael R. Helfrich as a private citizen.
Right. The request that we asked was, is it okay for the city solicitor's office to represent Mayor Helfrich, who's being challenged in his capacity as mayor, and there's a concurrent conflict of interest, and we asked city council if that would be waived. It didn't happen, so the case went forward. And we're not representing the mayor.
So in regards to city taxpayers' dollars, where does it say that we are responsible to pay for that external?
Issue has not come up at all.
What issue?
Pay.
Well, it's been brought up by the mayor plenty of times that the city has to pay for.
That isn't anything that the solicitor's office has put before you or analyzed.
So where's that coming from? It's been said multiple times.
I don't know.
The mayor has even said it.
It was told directly to me from the solicitor's office.
Okay, well, that would be Jason and not me. So that's why I didn't hear it. I mean, that's an issue that'll have to be discussed. If Jason has said that, I'll be glad to talk to him about it, and we'll give you an answer on that if it's an issue. The only thing we cared about when we submitted this was whether or not you would waive the concurrent conflict of interest, because we represent the city as an entity, and it consists of both the mayor and city council.
So as of now, we do not know who is responsible for the bill.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, no.
It just seems, to me, it seems like there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect between what the mayor's being advised to take an oath and not an oath, and now you're saying that the point is moot and the mayor's disagreeing with you.
Well,
I just don't think you guys are communicating.
There's a long-term disconnect based on the fact that you have two different solicitors coming to different meetings.
That's not our responsibility.
Yes.
That's not our problem.
So I would, one thing I would request is that if possible, that the full ethics committee could answer the question in order for us to move forward. This is, we've tried to stay as neutral as possible. And so clearly, the issue that has been put out in the media is the taxpayers footing the bill. And so we definitely need answers in regards to that, but definitely whether or not a decision can be, whether I would hope a decision can be made by the Ethics Committee to let us know if this is a private representation or if the city's responsible for it.
And the number I saw was $5,000, right? Is that the same number you saw, Councilwoman?
Yes.
That was the other day. I don't know what it's at now.
Is there any, are there any other questions from council? Any questions or comments from the public?
Hello, Ryan Supler. Question about having counsel, because the mayor had issues like this, disqualification issues prior. Did the government pay for the any kind of counsel for the other 2 times? And in case the mayor isn't successful or the petitioners are successful, I think the council should have something ready, or someone ready, or maybe a short list for the president judge of the common pleas for your county, just in case, because I did attend that hearing and it was about like 2 hours long, and Judge Vetter made sure that, I think his terminology was a promptly or prompt execution if it doesn't go his way. So I just think that the council or even the city or at whole should be ready in case that happens. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment. I believe Mr. Supler at that time, at one of the times, I don't know which time, when this issue was brought up before, when Mayor Helfrich was not mayor, in another capacity, I believe, and I would have to find it, but I believe it was quoted in an article that he did not want the city to be responsible for the payment for legal fees at that time.
I'm not sure to what you were referring, but if you were talking about the quote, the effort of 2012, the city's solicitors were already representing the city administration, so they would not have ever been available to me as a councilman. They were already representing the city. So I'm not sure where that, even the possibility of that would have come up. I guess I could have fought it and said it was a conflict of interest because the city was, the solicitors were representing this administration but not representing a sworn-in councilman. I guess I could have done that, but I'm not sure what you were referencing.
No problem. I'll share the article with you.
Okay.
Any other question or comment from the public?
Manuel Gomez, City of York. I just want to make clear that, from my understanding, there's no method for us to impose any of our collective will on what the president judge will decide in terms of a replacement. If a replacement appointment is to be made, we don't have a hand in that process. I think there's some questions that should be answered, some distinctions that should be made. The ethics question, I won't even speculate. One thing that comes to mind is, what sort of precedent is there for this? Is there any precedent at all? I haven't heard anything about it in terms of what could be a guide stone for how the city would move forward in what does appear to be, at least in some aspects, a precarious position, if not for the city as a body, for some components of the city, mostly the legal staff itself. We've seen some indecision here. We've seen some, I guess we could call it miscommunication, and I'll just leave it there. But altogether, it seems very cloudy and murky to me. I wish we had the benefit of timing. We just didn't. I don't think that there's much of a plot. There's a peanut gallery out there that thinks that this is some sort of nefarious move, somehow guided by counsel. I myself have seen evidence of no such thing. it just seems to be a question of timing. For the most part, heaven only knows where this ends up, but I don't think I've ever seen anything like this in all the times I've been watching what's going on in city affairs.
If I may, I'd like to just make one last brief comment, and that is just to reiterate, when I was given the advice of that it was unnecessary for an incumbent mayor to take the oath, that advice was given prior to your reorganization meeting. I was mayor. I continue to be mayor, but I was definitely in my first term as mayor at that time. It was the city solicitor that gave that advice. So the fact that the city would not be, or the city solicitor would not be given the chance to argue his own logic. This entire thing has never been about my logic. It is the logic of Jason Sable, Assistant City Solicitor of York. It boggles my mind that the individual who created the opinion that I then listened to, which is what I'm supposed to do as the mayor, I'm supposed to listen to the city solicitor. The person that created the opinion is not allowed to represent that opinion. We've asked a surrogate, someone who cannot be in the mind of Jason Sable. We've asked that surrogate to represent him, the solicitor of the city of York. And it just, somehow that does not see that particular part. I don't know if it doesn't seem ethical, but it's certainly not right to not allow a person to defend their opinion.
Well, in February, because council felt it was important to remain neutral, we did request a quo warranto through the DA and the Attorney General. And so we did that a couple of months ago. So to me, not only is that a conflict because the solicitor is supposed to represent the city. So even though he did give you advice, that's exactly what it is. And that doesn't mean that we're obligated, especially when there's so many questions that need to be answered, to move forward with that piece, which leads me to, I'm not necessarily sure why in the resolution it's referred to as a quo warranto petition. So, because it has nothing to do with city council and the request for a quo warranto, the petitioners is completely different. So, there's a lot of questions. Yes, it is. It's completely different.
Okay.
Mayor,
Are there any other?
Yes, I do. With all due respect, Mayor, you continue to blame council on this stuff, and you put it out there that it's council's fault, and this is not our, as a matter of fact, I'm disappointed that council didn't know that there could potentially be something illegal about the fact that you didn't get sworn in, and we didn't bring it up. They brought it up to our attention, and our duty is to move it forward. And that's what Councilwoman President did. And you continue to tell the media and to put it out there that it's council's fault. When are you going to take responsibility for your solicitor's actions?
It's our solicitor's actions. It's a city solicitor's.
And that's a conflict. I've always said for 2 years, that's a conflict of interest.
And I have said that the council should get their own counselor, their own counsel.
Right, so why are
that
we required?
Needs to be in your budget.
Why should we be required to appoint a solicitor who could potentially have ill-advised you? We're not required to do so, so that's why we voted the way we voted.
You didn't vote at all.
Actually, we sent it to committee.
We sent it to committee for the fact that, and you have made it seem like it's council's problem and fault that you didn't take your oath, or swear in.
I've never said that. I've never once said that.
It's been said, and
it hasn't been said by me. The solicitor instructed me, and I followed the solicitor's instructions. And then on January 23rd, the solicitor instructed me that perhaps I should take an oath, and we took an oath on the 24th. When the solicitor told me not to take an oath, I didn't take an oath. When the solicitor told me to take an oath, I took an oath. period. I haven't brought up council. What I have said is that council is potentially costing city taxpayers, because of the advice I got from the solicitor regarding who is going to be paying for this. I said that council just took a vote that cost taxpayers money. And until I hear otherwise, I'm going to stand by that. That if the solicitor was allowed to represent himself and me, because it was his opinion that I listened to, he would be doing it in his own duties as solicitor, and the citizens would not be paying any additional fees. Instead, the citizens, according to what I was told by the solicitor, would be liable for the fees incurred in my defense. Again,
So who did Jason get that information
you'll
from?
have to ask Jason.
So can we have this on the record to get this question answered?
Yeah, because we really need answers to the question, to let it just keep sliding and moving on. We need real answers because it's a real situation and a real concern for the community.
Were any of these questions asked of Jason? I'm just curious, because you had some questions prepared, but according to Jason, there were no questions asked.
That's why we're having committee.
That's why we're in committee.
Right, but the person but you didn't tell him to be at committee.
What?
It's the solicitor's office. It's the solicitor's office.
I talked to Jason.
But once again, he points it back to council. That's what we're talking about.
Jason said it's because he's in his capacity as mayor, because that was the question that came up. And I asked him, and he said that that's why the taxpayers, have to send that. So when you say that the question was asked, it was asked by me. Maybe I didn't tell you guys.
But even if he's saying it's in his capacity as mayor, what is he basing that off of? The letter from the PA Bar Committee doesn't give any advice in regards to that.
I'm not defending what he said. I'm just saying that the question was asked of me. When the mayor is saying that the question wasn't asked that anybody asked, yeah, they did ask.
Right, but he answered, and then nobody said, but yeah, you gave me an answer, but where did it come from? Because that's
I didn't ask that question.
I think it's a fair question.
But I didn't ask, nobody on council asked that question to Jason. We're asking it in committee.
Understood.
Solicitor's office.
But there was no ability for the solicitor's office to be prepared for your questions, because the solicitor's office didn't get the questions ahead of time. Instead, you're hitting Don here with the questions.
Okay.
And Don doesn't know necessarily what is in Jason's mind.
But we're not attorneys. So that's why we have it in committee, to have discussion. So you will get back to us. The solicitor's office will get back to us. If it's not a moot point, which was initially said, once you guys get on the same page.
The purpose of committee is for us to come here and discuss these topics. We are not required to provide you with questions ahead of time. We can, but we're not required to. This is our open format to have these discussions where the community can hear these discussions and the community can chime in on discussions. And sometimes we don't have the questions right away. Someone can say something in the audience and it can spark something. That is normal. That's why we have the committee discussions. And so you can't say that we didn't ask the question ahead of time. We don't have to have a question ahead of time to get an answer. It is the responsibility of the solicitor's office, if they know that they need to be here and to be present and to be available to give the answers to the questions. If you don't have the answer, that's fine.
Yeah,
just say you're going to get back and get the answer. We're not expecting the answers to always be here right away. Sometimes we don't have the answer. Sometimes you don't have the answer. You have to do research to get the answers to the questions.
This is between you and the solicitor.
And that's perfectly fine. But don't use the argument that we didn't ask the question and it had enough time, because that's not fair and that is not right and that's not accurate.
But once again, going back to what Councilman said, you always find a way to send it back to council, as it is our fault. And I think we're at a place now where we just have to own up that some things are just the way it is. We all make mistakes, and we just have to own up to it. That's really what it is, versus trying to put the blame always on council or the solicitor at this point, because that's what I'm hearing tonight, that you're just throwing it back on Jason. But that's all I have.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from anyone in the room? Okay. Is there a motion to move this on to the agenda for May 3rd. No motion. Or stays in committee. Okay, that is it for the general committee. Is there any council comment? Administration comment? Our next committee meeting is May 25th, 2022 at 6 o'clock p.m. I was going to request an ARPA update. My understanding, the majority of the funds that council has already taken action on they have not been spent. So we will request that someone, I would hope Ms. Baldwin would give us an update on why those funds have not been spent yet and what needs to be done in order to get these funds out into the community. All right, this committee meeting is adjourned. Have a good night.